Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear the sound of my voice. Thumbs up if you can, that would be great. Great. My name is Karen Solheim, and I'm a member of GAE Retired. I've been retired since 2012 and active with the GAE Retired organization. So we've been doing these pre-retirement seminars now, I guess, for 5 or 6 years. And you're in for a treat today. Usually retirees or potential retirees are the people who have the biggest smiles on their faces because they see the light at the end of the tunnel. So hopefully by the time we finish our morning together, you will have a wealth of information in your head, get some of your questions answered. And my goal is to send you a handout electronically that contains links to all the various segments today. So if you go through and you go, well, I missed that, I didn't get that, you'll have contact information so you can follow up with each of the presenters. So that seems to have worked well with various people needing to go through and to have additional questions answered. We're going to start this morning with a segment that is pre-recorded, and it's about documents that you need to have in order as you age to have in place. And so the speaker this morning, you won't be able to ask questions, but I'll give you her contact information so that you can follow up later. And if you're like me, I invite you, we'll have another series of pre-retirement seminar workshops next program year. So if you're not retiring this spring and you're within 5 years of retirement, please attend these. I hear new things every time that I listen and present or host these events. And so, and I need to hear things 23 times or so before they become part of my DNA. So if you'll give me just a minute, let me set up this video and we'll take a look at what Kelly has to say. I'm hoping on some level by the time we finish around 12:30 today, you will go through and go, whoa, I am overwhelmed. You might be. There are a lot of great speakers this morning presenting a wealth of.
So
Here we go.
planning in 3 easy steps. What that means is we've taken estate planning, and instead of talking about the documents, we're going to talk about the process of how we get there. So our 3 steps are create, communicate, and coordinate. And that's how we're going to get our estate planning done. A lot of my clients are in their 80s and 90s and have never done any estate planning because they felt like they didn't have an estate to plan for. Hopefully you're not in that boat, that you don't feel that way, but I will tell you, we all have an estate to plan for, because the biggest thing we do is we plan for incapacity. So what happens if you, for some reason, are unable to make your own decisions or manage your own welfare? Who's going to do that for you? So the documents we're going to talk about creating are an advance directive for healthcare, a financial power of attorney, and a will or some type of trust. We're really, the only trust we're going to talk about today is called revocable living trust. And I forgot to say, if you have questions, feel free, take yourself off mute and interrupt me, or drop them in the chat. I've got the chat open to catch questions as those come through as well. So our first step is create some of these documents. So on the advance directive for healthcare, this is the document that lets us name someone else to communicate with our doctors and make healthcare decisions for us in the event that we can't communicate with our doctors. This is a very important document, particularly if you are not married. If you're married, your spouse automatically gets to have that power if you're unable to communicate with your doctors. If you're not married, it's all of your adult children. So everybody take a moment and think about your kids and think about how well they get along with one another and how their values align with your values. And do you want them to all have to agree about what happens if the worst case scenario, you're in the hospital and unresponsive and you're not directing your own care? So the advanced directive for healthcare lets you avoid that because you get to name who that person is that's going to make healthcare decisions for you. If you want to be cremated, you want to have an advanced directive for healthcare because it lets you signify that you want to be cremated and designate one person who can sign the forms at the crematory after you die. That's a really big deal. My grandmother had pre-planned her cremation. We had prepaid her cremation. And when she died, the crematory came and picked up her body. And then they called us an hour later and said, okay, we need all of her kids to come in and sign the paperwork. My grandmother had 3 kids. My mom was here local. I have an uncle in Cincinnati. We could have emailed or faxed things back and forth with him to get his signature. But I have another uncle who lives in a van down by the river. And at the time, we luckily knew what river he was at, but there was no way we could email things to him. There was no way he was going to be able to figure out how to get to the UPS store and fax things back and forth with us. It took us 9 days to get him here after my grandmother died. So luckily, we did not have to wait 9 days to have her remains cremated because she had an advance directive for healthcare. So when we told the crematory all the kids is not an option, the crematory said, oh, well, did she have an advance directive? Yes, great. Just the agent on the advance directive has to sign. So then my mom was able to go and sign off on that. We've had somebody ask, if you have no children and no spouse, does the responsibility go to a niece or nephew? Kind of. We have a hierarchy. So it's spouse, children, parents, grandchildren, grandparents, siblings, nieces and nephews. And it's everybody in whichever first category you hit. So if you have no children, no spouse, your parents and siblings are all dead, then it's all of your nieces and nephews who have that authority. And then as we keep going down that list, number 7 in Georgia is adult friend, which is defined as any adult who's willing to take responsibility for your health care. That was the nod to same-sex couples back in 2012 when they added adult friend. Now that we have marriage equality, it's just a way that we can get the next door neighbor or any unmarried partner to have the authority to make healthcare decisions. So to avoid all that, get an advance directive for healthcare. Then you get to name that specific niece or nephew or neighbor or whoever that is to be able to make your healthcare decisions. Here's the worst case scenario. I've got a community going through this right now. I have a 82-year-old guy that I started talking to last summer. He is in the beginning stages of dementia. His sole living relative is a sister who lives in Indiana and her husband. And his sister and her husband both had COVID last year and both just barely survived. And they are still rehabbing and are really struggling. So he's got dementia. His sister was deathly ill within the past year and is working on rehabbing to get stronger again. He lives here. She hasn't lived here since she was a child. He wasn't sure. He's just feeling kind of overwhelmed by the whole process and wasn't sure who he wanted to name as his healthcare agent. He has 2 neighbors who have been watching out for him, taking care of him, taking him to his doctors, buying his groceries, doing all those things that we think of family and community doing for him. He finally agreed at the beginning of April that he was going to name one of those neighbors as his healthcare agent and his financial power of attorney, the agent on his power of attorney, because he realized his sister absolutely is not going to recover enough to be able to help him in this way. The day before we were supposed to sign, he had a massive heart attack and has been at Grady for 3 weeks. The reason he's at Grady now, he's recovered physically from the heart attack, but he's not competent enough to be able to sign the power of attorney or the advance directive for healthcare anymore. And so now the neighbors are having to go to the Fulton County Probate Court and apply for guardianship and conservatorship of this guy, which is a much more expensive process and takes 3 months, so that they've got the authority to get him out of Grady, because there's literally no one with the authority to sign for him to move into an assisted living or move into a nursing home. So that's the worst case scenario. So we avoid that by, on the healthcare side, getting the advance directive for healthcare. On the financial side, it's called a financial power of attorney. Sometimes it's called a durable power of attorney. Sometimes it's called a general power of attorney. Those all typically refer to the same document. It's the document that lets us name someone else to manage our finances in the event that we are unable to. So in this guy's case, the agent who, had he made it one more day before that heart attack, would have been able to sign, had he signed his power of attorney, the agent would have been able to sign the contract for him to move into an assisted living or move into a nursing home and access his money to pay those bills. All powers of attorney are not created equally, even though they often use the same names. Your agent on your power of attorney only has the specific powers you gave them. So if you didn't say they could sell your house, they can't sell your house. If you didn't say they could open a bank account, they can't open a bank account. Georgia updated our power of attorney law in 2018. We have a really good statutory power of attorney. So statutory means it was created by the state legislature and it's in our state statutes as a law. I suggest everybody at least start with that one. Even if you don't use a lawyer, get that statutory power of attorney. Atlanta Legal Aid has it on their website for free. There's a lot of reasons you still probably want to use a lawyer. There's some things that we need to do around Medicaid planning. So if somebody's in a nursing home that is not allowed under the statutory power of attorney, those powers weren't granted. But for the most part, for the vast majority of us relatively healthy folks, the statutory power of attorney is going to be sufficient while you're relatively healthy. So get something in place. Again, if you don't have power, if you have not signed a power of attorney, you haven't designated an agent, and something terrible happens and you're not able to make your decisions anymore, your family or your loved ones or your community have to file for guardianship and conservatorship of you in the probate court where you are, to get the authority to sign things for you, to take away your legal authority to be an adult and replace your judgment with their own. Under the power of attorney, your agent has to do what you want. So I spend a lot of time counseling folks in their 50s and 60s that they do not get to tell their parents what to do just because their parents signed a power of attorney. So the principal, the person who signs the power of attorney, is still in charge of themselves. No one can take your power to be in charge of yourself away except a probate court judge. So the power of attorney also makes sure that you get to stay in charge to the best of your ability for the rest of your life. Someone has asked, does the advance directive for healthcare have to be notarized? No. In Georgia, your advance directive for healthcare requires 2 witnesses. I forgot to say where you can get that. If you Google Georgia advance directive for healthcare, a couple of the top hits are going to be state of Georgia websites. I think the very first hit is the Georgia Department of Aging, and you can download the advance directive for healthcare. Get it from one of those state websites though. Don't use LegalZoom or any of those paid services. It's available totally for free on Georgia's form from the state of Georgia. And the same thing on the power of attorney. With our power of attorney law that passed in 2018, I have only once so far seen someone use one of those paid legal services websites and had the correct form. And in Georgia right now, the correct form matters. for the financial power of attorney. So get it, if you're not willing to use a lawyer, get it from the legal aid website so that you've got the correct form. That correct form basically guarantees that banks are going to accept the power of attorney. So for the financial power of attorney, if you use Georgia's form and follow the rules about Georgia's form, then you can, when your agent presents that power of attorney at the bank can't give them the runaround. The bank has two options: accept the power of attorney or call the police for fraud. That's it. They can't say, well, we don't accept powers of attorney, or we need the principal to come in and sign something, or any other number of things. This is too old. I've heard all sorts of excuses from banks for why they didn't want to take powers of attorney. And so our state legislature said that's enough. And if you're going to do banking in Georgia, you've got to follow our rules. And the rules are banks have to accept it or they have to call the cops. So using that form is really important and really great for you here in Georgia. If you have a power of attorney that you signed before 2018, it is still valid. Most banks will still accept it. Some credit unions are giving a lot of pushback on this. So if you're a member of a credit union, it might be worthwhile to update your power of attorney to get on Georgia's current statutory form if you signed one before 2018. The financial power of attorney requires one witness and one notary here in Georgia. Half of states require two witnesses and one notary. So if you're planning to retire outside of Georgia, it might be worthwhile to upgrade your power of attorney a little bit and make sure you've got two witnesses on it to make it easier to use in whatever state you're going to. The other way that powers of attorney are not created equal is when they become effective. So durable means that it's effective even after you become incapacitated. I have never seen a power of attorney that was not durable. In the 1970s and 80s, we realized that most people are signing powers of attorney because they want someone to be able to help them in the future when they need help. And so the point for most of us assigning a power of attorney is to name somebody to manage things when we're incapacitated in the future. And the old 800-year-old agency law that sort of created powers of attorney said, basically your agent could do whatever you could do. And so if you were incapacitated, your agent couldn't do anything because you couldn't do anything. We got rid of that because we knew that was not helpful. So all powers of attorney basically are durable at this point. They're good even if the principal who signed it is incapacitated, because that's usually when we want to use them. But when do they start working? So they don't end usually until death or revocation. We've got a couple options for when they start working. One is it starts working immediately when you sign it. That's the default here in Georgia now. So if you sign a power of attorney, if it doesn't say anything about when it's effective when you sign it, and your agent could do something for you the very next day. The other, what's been the more popular option in the last few years, is called a springing power of attorney. The springing power of attorney springs into effect at some point in the future. And most of the time, that point is when a doctor writes a letter that says you are incapable of managing your financial or legal affairs. That's a problem. I don't know how many of you know doctors, but doctors do not like to say that their patients are sick. Doctors like to say that their patients are healthy, and due to their excellent medical knowledge, that they're keeping everyone in the fittest possible shape. So getting a doctor to sign a letter that says one of their patients is unable to manage their own finances anymore is really challenging. So we try to avoid that most of the time by having folks typically sign a power of attorney that's immediately effective. As soon as you sign it, it's effective, and your agent can help you and manage things for you immediately. What your agent can't do is replace your desires or opinions with their own. So their job is to do what you want them to do, not to force what they want to do on you. So that's your protection. If your agent does something that you don't like, um, they are liable to you for that. So they don't have third party liability, but they have liability to you. All right, the last document we want to talk about creating is a will. You do not need a will. I'm the only lawyer who's ever going to tell you that. You do not need a will. You probably want a will, but you don't need one. Georgia has a default for what happens if you don't have a will. If you don't have a will and you are married and have children, your spouse and children split everything equally. So I'm married, I have 2 children. If I died right now without a will, my wife would get a third, my 2-year-old would get a third, and my 5-year-old would get a third of everything I own. Young children, people under age 18, cannot own things in Georgia or any other state for that matter. And so my wife would have to go to the probate court and get conservatorship of our 2-year-old and our 5-year-old, and then tell the court how she's spending their thirds of everything I own until they turn 18. And when they turn 18, they get to be in charge of it. That's not ideal. Hopefully, since you all are looking forward to retirement, not too many of you have little bitty children, but yeah, it's not ideal for spouses to have to get parents to have to get conservatorship of their own children and tell the court how they're spending money on their own children for 13 to 18 years. So I choose to have a will. My will says everything goes to my wife because I don't think my children need to inherit things now. They're children, they need to play. My will also says if both adults die, then we leave everything in trust for the children. So the children still, nobody's going to the probate court to get conservatorship of them. We have named their godparents as the trustees who can manage their money until they turn older than 18. Because I don't think an 18-year-old needs to manage half of what we've saved up at this point either. So my kids are going to have to be a little bit older before they get to be in charge of that money. So I choose to have a will because that's a choice I make. You might choose to have a will because you don't want your spouse to share with your kids, like me. Or you might be in a second marriage and you want everything to go to your kids and nothing to go to your spouse. Or you might have a person in your family with special needs and you want to protect whatever benefits that person's on, be it Medicaid or SSI or any special housing benefits. And so inside your will, like the trust I leave for my kids, you can leave a special needs trust for someone with a disability so that they don't lose their public benefits. And the funds that they inherit from you can go to supplement whatever other benefits they're getting. Or you might have a trust because the people you want to, or you might have a will because the people you want to inherit from you are different than the people who inherit under the law. So it follows that same scheme as the healthcare. It's your spouse and children, and then it goes down your family line. So if any of your kids are dead, your grandkids take. If you've got no spouse and children, it goes back up to your parents. If both your parents are gone, your siblings, then your nieces and nephews. And if you exhaust that line, then we go back up to your grandparents and then your aunts and uncles. And so it just keeps going down the family line. So we have to literally not be able to find anyone related to you before it sheets to the state. So some people are worried if they don't have a will, the state gets everything. We got to go pretty far out and be able to find 0 relatives before the state gets anything. So we've got 2 questions here about wills. I'm going to answer the easier one first. If your will is over 20 years old, should it be updated? Or must it be updated? It must not. There's no rule that says a will of any age is bad. The other question is going to help answer this one, though. You probably want to update a will that's over 20 years old because the people might have changed. I will tell you, this is my business. This is what I do every day. I have updated my parents' powers of attorney, advanced directives for healthcare. I cannot get them to update their will. My parents' will says that when they die, I have to go live with my Aunt Vaughn. I am married and have 2 children. My Aunt Vaughn would love for us to come live with her. But there's so much about my parents' will, since I know that I know is wrong. The people who were named as their executors 25 years ago are not the right people who should be managing their estate anymore. So we've got things that need to be updated. You may have left things in trust for children at some point. So sorry, I saw a new question, but the length of time of your will is not a problem. It's that your family situation may have changed. The other reason you may want to update an older will is that a will requires 2 witnesses. To be valid, a will has to be signed by you and signed by 2 witnesses who will not inherit from you. No problem. And then when you die, we have to go find those 2 witnesses and get them to sign off to say that they saw you witness the will and you were competent and you knew it was your will and nobody was forcing you to sign it. Great. Unless the will was signed 20 years ago. We've got a case right now where one of those 2 witnesses said, that's my signature, but I don't remember signing it. I don't remember any of it. Yeah, those people were my neighbors, but I don't remember this. I can't sign that affidavit. Or I've had wills that are 40 or 50 years old and we're trying to find neighbors from 40, 50 years ago. The worst one I ever had was a will that got signed. A lady used a software program, created her own will, took it to the UPS store and signed it in front of 2 witnesses who were the 2 people behind her in line. And then this was in the early 90s. So we also, at that point, had created a thing called a self-proving affidavit. So a self-proving affidavit means you, as the testator, the person making the will, and the 2 witnesses are all going to sign the same day you sign the will, this affidavit that says you were old enough to create a will, which is 14 in Georgia. You knew it was your will, you were competent, and no one was forcing you to sign it. And then you sign that in front of a notary and it becomes a piece of what gets probated. So we don't have to go back and find the witnesses. So which is awesome. So wills don't have to be notarized, but the self-proving affidavit has to be notarized. And this became standard practice in Georgia in the early 90s. So if your will doesn't have a last page of the will that's signed by you and 2 witnesses, and then an additional page behind that says self-proving affidavit at the top that's signed by you, 2 witnesses, and a notary, then you need a new will. Not because it's 20 years old, but because it's going to be hard to probate. So this lady had that self-proving affidavit, but they didn't know what they were doing. And they all signed in the wrong places. And the self-proving affidavit was not valid because they all signed in the wrong places. And so the probate court was like, well, you've got to find these witnesses. And we tracked them down. It was 3 retired school teachers in their 70s and 80s when this will was signed. And here we come 20 years later trying to find the witnesses, and we found them. The witnesses, our client was dead, obviously, because we were probating her will. The witnesses were in memory care units, both of them. They both had advanced dementia. So they were not going to be able to sign anything for us. But they messed up the affidavit so bad that the notary just became another witness on the will. And so we found the notary. He still worked for UPS, but now he's in Lexington, Kentucky. And he was like, yes, she was a regular customer. I knew her. I totally remember this, and was able to sign the affidavit for us. So we were able to probate her will. So it's not age of the will, it's whether it meets some of those really technical requirements here in Georgia. We've got a question. If you're a legal guardian of a minor, would you be in line to inherit before their parents? No. Legal guardians are not legally related to the children in their care. So a legal guardian means you have the legal authority to make decisions for that child, but not that you're related to them or their parents. So heirs and the people who inherit under the law without a will are your legal relation, the people who are legally related to you. Again, grandparents, nope, because it goes down the family line first. So we're going down to children and then back up to parents. So you would be the parent of that child's parents. And again, that's another good point. If you have custody of your grandchildren, they're still your grandchildren. Without a will, your children inherit from you, not your grandchildren. So if you have custody of your grandchildren and you want to leave something to them, you need a will to be able to name them as the beneficiaries. I've got a question about, is it best to have a will or a trust because of taxes? So currently, under the current tax scheme, which is likely going to change by the end of the year, but currently, we have no estate taxes in Georgia. So we're not worried about anybody paying state estate taxes in Georgia. The federal estate tax exemption is $11.7 million. So if you have things that are less than $11.7 million, all of that's going to go to your beneficiaries without taxes. If you're married, you get to double that. So now we've got a little over $23 million is passing without any taxes. So most of us are not worried about estate taxes. The reason you might use a trust is to avoid probate. So a revocable living trust is a document. It's a kind of trust that many people use when they don't want their assets to go through probate. Probate is the process where if there's a will, you take the will, and if there's no will, you just file a petition at the probate court where the person who died lived that says they died, they owned these things, and these things should go to these people. If there's no will, it's to their legal heirs. And if there's a will, it should go to the beneficiaries named in the will. And I want to be in charge because I'm the best relative or because I'm named as the executor of the will, whichever way you get there. And then the probate court checks with all the heirs, so everyone who would have inherited if there's no will, to make sure everybody agrees that this is the right administrator because there's no will, or that this is the right will if there is a will, and then issues to that person who's going to be in charge what's called letters testamentary if we have a will, which is your legal authority to do what the will says, or letters of administration if there's no will, which is the administrator's legal authority to distribute the estate to the heirs. In either case, any creditors get paid first, and whatever's left goes to the beneficiaries of the will or the heirs if we have no will. That's what probate means. In Georgia, it's not terrible. It takes about 6 months here. But a lot of people still don't want their family to go through that process, or they want money to be available quicker than that. And one of the ways to do that is to use a revocable living trust, which is a document that says, let's use me, the Kelly Napier Trust. And so Kelly Napier is the trustee of the Kelly Napier Trust. And so I'm in charge. Trustee is the person in charge. I'm also the beneficiary. As long as I'm alive, the money in the Kelly Napier Trust is for Kelly Napier. So it sounds pretty good, right? It's all about us. It even uses my own social security number. The only thing that's different is that instead of the deed to my house saying Kelly Napier, it says Kelly Napier, trustee of the Kelly Napier Trust. And when I die, the trust doesn't die. The trust continues to exist, and it has terms for who the next beneficiaries are going to be and who the next trustee is. And so the next trustee takes over and distributes the money however I've told them to in the trust. So we don't have that 6-month administrative period of probate because the trustee can immediately start distributing things. Probate's how we get things from dead people to whoever else it's supposed to go to. And if you've titled everything you own in a trust, trust can't die. And so then the assets just go from the trust to whoever they're supposed to go to, and we don't have to use the probate court. So lots of people use revocable trust. In some states, probate's terrible. It takes several years. You need a lawyer to help you manage that process. In those states like California, New York, Florida, everybody wants to use a revocable trust. In Georgia, it's not that terrible. A lot of people don't use trust in Georgia. I will caveat that with, if you own property in more than one state, so you live here and you've got that mountain house in North Carolina or the family farm in Alabama or a beach house somewhere, you want to use a revocable living trust so that your estate doesn't have to be probated in every single state where you own real property. That's the problem with real property, is you have to have permission from the court in that state to transfer real property from a dead person. And so if you are in that situation, you want the revocable trust to get property in all your states titled in the trust. Other ways you can avoid probate is if you don't own real property, if you rent wherever it is you live, you can name beneficiaries on everything else you own. So all your bank accounts, all your investment accounts, any retirement accounts, be those IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, all of those, you can name beneficiaries directly on the accounts. Life insurance, savings bonds, if you can think of it, you can name a beneficiary on it, with the exception of real property. In some states you can, but in Georgia, you can't name a beneficiary to real property. So that's why some folks use trust to avoid probate. So I spent a lot of time talking about that first C of create today. And I've got about 5 minutes left to talk about the other two C's. So the most important piece is the communicate piece. So communicating, you actually do that before you create the documents, right? You talk to the people that you want to serve in these various roles and make sure they're willing to do it. You talk to your family about your healthcare wishes and make sure that they know what your wishes are. I mentioned that I had my parents update their powers of attorney, update their advance directives for healthcare. We did their advance directives about 11 years ago. My mom was getting ready to go into open heart surgery. This was not her first surgery. She is not a healthy person. But I was like, we should really have this conversation. It was the first time she was really scared about a surgery, though. And we all sat down, my siblings, my parents, and I, and we went through the advance directive, and we found out that none of us, not a single person at the table, knew what my mom's healthcare wishes were. We were all wrong. Had something happened in any of those prior surgeries, we all would have made the wrong choice. Even my dad didn't know. So communicating that with your loved ones, what are your healthcare wishes? Do you want life support? In what situations is so important. And then coordinate. You want to coordinate your assets. This is everything from naming beneficiaries everywhere you can to jointly owning things. I do not hear that to say I'm telling you to add your children to the ownership of anything you have. I am absolutely not saying that. Because if you add your children's name to your bank account or the deed to your house, they own that asset just like you do. I know practically you're like, this is my account. Their name's just on there for convenience. Legally, their name's on there because you just gave it to them. And so we don't want to accidentally give your assets to your children. I'm not worried about them stealing from you most of the time, but I am worried about them getting divorced, or them having an accident and having creditors, or them just making poor financial choices and going through bankruptcy. And now all of a sudden your assets, your savings, your house are in danger to their creditors. And so I'm never ever saying add your children to your accounts. But if you're married, you might choose to add your spouse. You might not to choose to add your spouse. And I've had somebody ask about stepchildren. Stepchildren are not legally related to you. And so they do not inherit from you unless you specifically include them in a will. So if you are married and you die, your spouse and your legal children will inherit from you if you don't have a will. But your stepchildren will never inherit from you unless you specifically include them. If you're worried about you dying first and your spouse inheriting things and then stepchildren inheriting from your spouse and your children being left out, we can fix that too. What we do is we say, when you die, your assets go in a trust, that your spouse has access to the trust, but not ownership of that trust. So they can use the money, but they don't own the money. And then when they die, the trust, whatever's left in the trust, goes to your kids, not to your stepkids. So there's lots of options for how we can make sure stepchildren do not inherit. However, half siblings are legally related to you because they share a parent with you. And so I've got a case right now where we've got 3 siblings, and about 10 years ago, they found out that they have 2 half brothers. And so one of the sisters has died without a will. And so her 2 siblings, and then these 2 half brothers that she met at age 50, are also, the 4 of them are now going to share in her estate. So half siblings are the same as full siblings, but stepchildren and step siblings are not related to you. All right, Karen, I think I have 3 minutes left. Does anyone else have other questions?
Kelly, you actually have. And I'm going to stop sharing at this point in time. For those of you who joined us after 9 o'clock, that was a recorded segment from an earlier pre-retirement workshop. And as I mentioned to people at 9, you will go through and receive a copy of this recording and then contact information for all of the presenters. And so you can reach out to Kelly if you do have a question from this morning concerning all the legal documents that you should have in place. So glad everybody is here this morning. We've had some people join us during the first presentation, and we're going to move on to the second presentation. We will have a speaker later on this morning directly from the Teacher Retirement System of Georgia. But our next speaker, Dan Powers, is a member of the GAE Retired Executive Committee and attends all the TRS meetings. And we know that a lot of meetings that involve educators are held during the work week when educators are in the classroom. So Dan is part of the TRS monitoring committee as a member of GAE Retired, and he's going to give an overview of TRS just so that you know what is involved in the TRS system. Our presenter from TRS later on, Mike Zorum, will go through it and give more details about retiring as such. So Dan, let me cue up the PowerPoint.
There it is.
And there it is.
And I'll begin. My name is Dan Powers, as Karen has introduced me. And given what's going on in the world today and all the bad news that's coming our way, this segment is good news. This is about TRS, and you see before you on the screen that there's a large notation of the website, and then there's an arrow that goes up to My TRS login. And if you do not have an account with TRS, I would advise you to go to that website and open an account for yourself. You get all kinds of good information, from calculations to how you go about getting counseling if you're nearing retirement. It's just a wealth of information. So number one on your list, if you haven't done it already, is to go ahead and establish an account with TRS. You already are a member, whether you like it or not, and you should like it. But you need that account to stay abreast of things that are involved with your individual life, as well as the general, what's going on with TRS. Next slide. We just heard from the executive director, Buster, last name, Evan, at our annual GAERA. He spoke to the delegates, and I think he said that it's still around $98 billion in assets. That's down from it was almost up to 110 billion, well over 100 million anyway, a billion, I'm sorry. But if you've noticed that there's a certain volatility in the markets right now, and the assets have fluctuated quite a bit. They're a little bit down from what they were earlier in the year, but they'll come back. We got very good financial managers. The other is the statistics. We got 282,000 plus change contributing members, and they contribute to all these retired members that have had done 25 to 30 years in most cases of contributing, and now they are receiving. Next slide. Here's a little chart that gives you a summary of what's the demographics, let's say, and the statistics involved with what you're getting and who's getting it and when they're getting it and total payroll. EFT, I always get a kick out of that. The EFT, that's electric fund transfer, 99.9%, I think that actually is. There are probably 3 people that insist on getting a hard copy of their paycheck. The rest of us have direct deposit, basically. So yeah, I just get a charge of that. We've got a few people that just, they want to feel that check before they put it in the bank. I'm assuming there's no questions there. That's pretty self-explanatory. Maybe basically you might want to look at the average monthly benefit, and later in the thing in the program here, you'll see how to calculate that if you already don't know. Next slide. This is Buster's favorite part of his presentation. He always likes to point out that the maximum plan is well, it's now down, and that makes him gleeful. I think that it used to be about 62% take the maximum plan. Now it's down to 58. And what he's getting at is, though, he wants people to see the options. You have various options you can have, and they are, in most cases, you are going to take your maximum plan. That's what I have. But sometimes you want a different plan, particularly if you're concerned about a spouse that might be in need of your pension should you pass on. But in most cases, people just take the maximum plan.
And Mike Zarm from TRS, when he joins us later on this morning, will talk about what's involved in each of the different plans.
Yes, thank you. What is the difference between a defined benefit and a defined contribution? Well, there's a big difference, as we'll go through this and see. First of all, what is the TRS formula? No, I guess we're going to start with the difference, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's do the difference.
Okay.
The value of a defined benefit plan is for educational policy, and I don't have to read that to you, but it's important for these 3 reasons: recruitment, retention, and retirement. And retirement, and that's me, and that's Karen, and that's lots of other people. We just saw 140,000 plus. They retire with dignity and honor. But more importantly, probably for the educational system, is that we were able to recruit pretty good professional people, and we can retain them with the care of a defined benefit plan. And we'll see the difference here shortly. Defined benefit versus defined contribution, comparing 2 types of pension plans. Here we go. Retirement income stream is guaranteed for life. I will get my pension as long as I'm living. And I'll talk to about later about the COLA you get every year. But right now, it's a guaranteed stream of income. Those people that have a defined contribution, that means that they are responsible basically for the income they're going to have. Quite often the corporation or whoever's setting up the pension plans will make contributions to your retirement income, but ultimately you or your financial advisor are the ones that are going to decide where that money is going to be invested. And it's not guaranteed. If anybody went through 2008, you know what can happen. And right now we're suffering from a very hot economy, which is full of inflation. And a lot of people are predicting that there might be a recession or worse for the naysayers. But at any rate, it is subject to the economy. It is subject to your investment prowess, or it is subject to the financial advisor that you are using to invest your savings for retirement. Next. Defined benefit employer responsible for investing the contributions. The employer in this case is TRS, not your county system. The county system also pays for your benefits, as you'll see in a few minutes. As I said before, you, the employee, are responsible for investing your contributions. And if you're good at it, great. But I'll tell you what, a lot of people are that good at it. Even on Wall Street, they make errors. And unless you're doing it as a profession, and unless you really are on the ball as to what's happening on the stock markets and bond markets and crypto markets and all these other things that are happening in the investment theaters, you have to be very careful. And this is probably the most important thing. As I was saying, if you go onto the TRS website and you open your account, you can see what you're going to get. You know, and once you have the formula and you know what your salary is, which everybody should know, you can calculate it monthly or daily or yearly, however you want to know. But you know what you're going to get when you retire. If you do 30 years or whatever number of years you do, you'll know exactly how much you're going to get each month and each year. And as we said, sometimes it's shake the dice as far as what your income is going to be. You may be rolling high and mighty for 10 years, and then suddenly, boom, what happened to my accounts? And suddenly you're going to be working another job while you're in retirement, because the vagaries of the stock market would have an impact on your later life, your retirement life. Next. Defined by, in our case, inflation protection and survivor benefits are usually built in, and our inflation protection is the best in the United States, I'd say, from what I've heard, and from what I've heard in the discussions on the TRS board, what people have said outside of TRS. We have one of the best defined benefits programs in the United States, and that inflation protection is an important part of it. And it says on the other side that those benefits are not built in. You better hope the market's appreciating, or wherever your investments go are appreciating faster than inflation. And this year you're going to have trouble with that one. What is the difference between a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan? We did that, so sorry. What is the TRS formula? I'm sorry, it's still early. I'm only on my second cup of coffee. Well, you can read it as well as I, but 30 years credible service, and you become vested. And once you have 10 years of credible service, but in that case, you have to wait until you're age 60 at least. And that's important because so many of the employees in our public education system are women, and often women who have decided to have families And during the time of child rearing, quite often, they are the home keepers, the keepers of the children. So they opt out of their profession if they can. And so sometimes they won't have the full 30 years. And sometimes a lot of people do teaching as a second career, a lot of military, a lot of people that get disgusted with whatever they're doing and they just want to try something different, or they feel that they have a calling, and they'll come in late in life. And then they do have that option once they have the 10 years of retiring at age 60. For many of us, and myself included, and most of my colleagues, 30 years of credible service, and then you retire whenever you want. In my case, I retired when I was 54. And I've had a lot of retirement years now. A lot of good pension. Here's the formula. Years of credible service times the multiplier, which is the 2%, times your 24 months highest salary. Is that right? Did I get it right that time?
24 consecutive highest months.
Right. So if you were a principal, say, and decided you didn't like being a principal, but you did it for 3 years or 2 years or whatever, and then you went back to the classroom and you found, oh, well, that's pay. I lost a good deal of pay. Well, they will use that administrator salary rather than your last couple of years teaching. Now, in most cases, the maximum benefit will be based on your last 2 years. That's not written in stone, but it's more the logic. It's more the one. It's the norm. It's the norm. But like I said, there are exceptions to that. So here's the example, and you can see what you would get as a retiree. So 30 years times 2%, 50,000 times 50,000. That's 30,000 a year and 2,500 per month.
And the 50,000 is just an arbitrary example number plugged in there to give an example of what it would be mathematically.
And all of you members of the of GAE should know it's easy to see what the salary schedule is. You can find it in a number of sources, but GAE has it as well. And you can see what you'll max out at with if you had a T6 or a T5 or something. Some people work for 40 years, and that's the maximum you can work and actually get and continue to increase your TRS benefit. If you do the full 40 years, of course, you get 80% of what your salary would be, and that would be 48. So it would be significantly higher. But in this day and age, it's rare for people to go 40 years. I'll just say that. I know of a couple, but most of them weren't doing it last century. They're still here. But since all the different federal requirements, all the different state requirements, all the different local requirements, and now we got new laws where we got parental involvement, people just they can't last 40 years anymore. But again, you see what you get. The unused sick leave credit. They've been trying to tinker with this for quite some time, and you can thank GAE and GAE retired for keeping a constant vigil while the General Assembly is in session, because they'd like to tamper with that. But right now, as you can see, 9 months of sick leave credit equals 1 year of service, and you can add that to your pension years.
I actually have 29 years of service credit, but had over a year of unused sick leave. So I did retire with my full 30 years plus a benefit. So unused sick leave credit is a wonderful thing.
It is, and it's particularly good if you got a spouse that takes care of kids when they're sick, or and you don't have to use your sick leave, which was my case. My wife at the time, quite often we would go in and out of the workplace, but quite often she was there, so I was able to accumulate a lot of sick leave. But back in the day when I retired, you had to use it up if you wanted it. So in my case, I took 6 months of sick leave and then retired. And there's reason for that, but I won't go into that. At any rate, as I was suggesting, the General Assembly is always trying to tinker with that, and they can't do it to people that are currently employed, but what they usually do is try to do it on new teachers coming into the profession. There's been a number of court decisions where this is basically a contract. When you became a teacher in Georgia, you were part of the deal was you were going to get these benefits. So they have a lot of trouble with that in terms of what they can tinker with. But any tinkering can lead to disaster. So we are constantly vigilant. And anytime they go after anything that's involved with the TRS, we usually are successful in beating those back. And HB 109 was sent to committee and never seen again once they realized that the educators of Georgia were serious about don't mess with our retirement, please. Cost of living adjustments. And again, I mentioned this earlier, this is one of the best things you'll ever see in a retirement system, a teacher retirement system particularly. I know that we're the only ones that get a 3% COLA each year awarded at 1.5 increments twice a year, compounded, whatever it is, in financial terms. But on July 1st, when I get my check, there'll be a 1.5% bump. And on January 1st, the same thing happens, a 1.5% bump. And that's based on the cost of living. And I will just say this, I've been retired for a very long time, and I've always gotten my 1.5 COLA. This bill wanted to get rid of the compounded 1.5 twice a year and just make it 3%. It wouldn't have been a devastating blow to anybody to get the 3% once a year, but it was just another case of them tinkering with TRS. And it's not only the fact that it wouldn't have a huge impact. It's the idea that the legislature was becoming involved with our TRS, the teacher retirement system. And that's the one thing we want to prevent if we ever can. It's happened in other states, and they've just hijacked the whole retirement system in some states. And so we are constantly vigilant for bills like this, HB 109. It was a very long bill, and it had a number of very unpleasant aspects to what they wanted to do with TRS to save money. But that was beat back too. This gets into a number of things. There are people that want what they call pension reform because they claim that for various reasons and maybe not ours as much as some other states, have unstable retirement plans, and they've got all these ideas, and most of them, by the way, are trying to convert them into contribution defined pensions rather than having it as benefit defined. And you can go through these, and we, Karen and myself and Debbie Simons, who happens to be a GAE retired, is chair of the TRS now, which is a great honor for her, but it's also a wonderful statement of how much confidence they have in GAE to have her. But we all attended a conference which was to explain how unstable and how iffy our pension system was. And these do we have other slides which show the groups that are involved with pension reform? Well, anyways, there's a number of well-funded think tanks that their main purpose in the world is to attack retirement systems, and they've been successful in some places. So far, they haven't done real well in Georgia, but they have raised alarms. They have a lot of money behind them, and they have a lot of so-called logic behind them. But so far, we've been able to beat back some of the things they're trying to do. When they say pension reform, red flags should come up whenever you hear that, because they're not working in our interests. I'll just say that. How the legislation works. This is the biennium, which means that a bill can be introduced the first year of the biennium, and it's a 2-year session. And one of the reasons they have the fiscal impact aspect of it makes it impossible to do it in 1 year. They've got to have the studies done, and then they act on it during the second year, unless we can stop them the first year, which we have successfully in many cases. This was one that was passed and does impact TRS, but even the TRS financial people, as well as the board members, said that this is not really a problem. Basically, what it allows for alternative investment. If you look at the two brown ones, venture capital and hedge fund equity, and to some extent real estate, now that the gurus who invest for us and have accumulated those $100 billion in assets can take 5% of the assets and put it into alternative investments. From the meetings we've attended, they said that they probably have maybe 1% now in alternative investments, and it would take years upon years to get to 5% if they ever did. But sometimes there's opportunities, and the professionals that are running our investment programs are very cautious, very conservative, but very very savvy. I'll just put it that way. So that one didn't hurt, and even Debbie Simons as chair said that doesn't bother us. And the other retirement systems that are public retirement systems in Georgia, like the employee retirement system, already does that, and they are invested 5%. Yes, back to work. Let's see. I get really confused here because they had a number of bills, and the one that was getting the most traction was that after 1 year of retirement, you could go back to work full time. Is that right? Am I got that right, Karen?
Yes, the governor signed this into legislation this season.
And so that's a benefit if you're, maybe you want to go on a cruise and you figure, well, my regular pension's not going to fund that. So you can go back to work, and you can also go back to work part-time. And that's often a even more happy outcome for people to work part-time rather than full-time. But now you can if you so choose. And the only thing is that when you go back to work, the salary, they take the 6% out, but it doesn't go to your personal account anymore. You can't build anymore by going back to work. But if I recall right, they still take the 6% out, right?
They do not. The district pays the employer and the employee contribution. The
Okay.
caveat with this piece of legislation that passed is that to go back full-time, you have to have 30 plus years of critical service, and you have to be in one of 3 critical needs areas as defined by the local RESA. So this was an opportunity if we needed a calculus teacher in South Georgia or a French teacher in Northwest Georgia to put those people with experience back into the classroom. You still can go back to work now at 49% without having the 30 plus years of credible service.
And of course, there's the need, they gotta have the need.
Right.
So. Okay, they did the formula. And now how is TRS funded? This is always kind of a surprise to some people. If you look in bucket number 1, you'll see a few pennies and nickels and dimes down there. And that's our employee contributions. That's the 6% that's taken out of your salary. That's that's the jar on the left. Then we have the employer contributions, which are at this point 19.8, or did they go up to 20%?
I think it's 19.8. We'll show that in a minute.
Yeah, at any rate, that's the employees, and you can see that it's much larger than the employees contribution, which of course 6% versus 19%, that would be logical. But if you look on the right, you'll see the investments, that $100 billion that is of assets. That's the jar on the right, and that's what we get from the TRS system directly through their investment programs. And that's able to fund most of what your retirement's going to be, as you can see from the jars. Okay, there it is, 19.8. I think I do have a memory. You can see that the employee rate has stayed very constant since 2012, where it was a little bit lower, but now it's up to 6%. And I think that's the legislative limit. Is
Right, it has to be by law between 5 and 6%.
Yeah, and you can see that there's some variance in what the employer's rate, and of course, a lot of local systems were screaming when it got above 20%, and they've been trying to keep it under 20% now, and fairly successful lately. But it does impact local spending, obviously, when they have to pay a higher rate. And here's your rolling position, and if you look real carefully, you might be able to actually read that. But it's just basically the net position of the TRS investments. And
So if it's okay, Dan, I'll explain this slide because I just like it a lot. This is just a hypothetical case of showing the various jars of money. And let's pretend you have this teacher who retired at age 59 in 2010. And 8 years later, this person would have received over $370,000 in benefit payments. Well, of that 370,000, about 46,000 comes from what the employee invested. So what you're putting in as the 6% out of your paycheck gets used up in 2 or 3 years in your benefit account. And then about 25% of that amount is from the employer contributions. But the mainstay, as Dan is saying, comes from the investments. And we are told that you can't even get on the investment floor at the TRS building in Atlanta. You cannot attend investment committee meetings. Most of the investments are done in-house, and the investors are doing a good job of securing our retirement future.
yeah, everybody has been lauding them for years on the good job they've been doing. She's happy.
She is, and this is not coming up for whatever reason. So we'll go on to the next slide. And we've talked about those 3 things. And hopefully this has given you a great overview of TRS.
Which means that I am concluding my presentation.
Thank you, Dan.
Good morning, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. Again, you will be getting an email from me that'll have contact information for all our presenters and linked information. so you can review this at your leisure. And our next presenter is from the Social Security Administration, Anise Norman. And Anise shares a wealth of information about not only, excuse me, not only Social Security, but a little bit about Medicare also. And so Anise, it's always a pleasure to have you with us this morning. I continue to learn things every time you share. So thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Anise Norman. I'm a public affairs specialist with Social Security. What I want to do is just kind of give you a general overview of the things that you need to know when you're thinking about or planning for retirement with Social Security. One of the first things that you need to understand is that Social Security, it was never designed to replace your pre-retirement income. It is only going to replace approximately 40%. So if you know that 40% of your retirement income is going to come from Social Security, you need to be thinking about your other sources such as, your pension. Do you have any annuities, a 401k, money in a savings? Are you going to get VA benefits? And the question you need to ask yourself is this going to be enough to sustain me in retirement? Because most financial planners will tell you that you're going to need somewhere between 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income to live comfortably in retirement. And I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, at least you'll know what your Social Security piece will be for you. Okay, here on the screen is where you need any general information about Social Security. This should be your first stop. Come visit us at www.socialsecurity.gov, or sometimes it's www.ssa.gov. This is where you're going to get the most current, the most up-to-date information about Social Security. Our offices are now open for walk-in traffic, but I would just advise you that if you do need to go to an office, contact that local office first, because if whatever your issue is, it may be something that we can do over the telephone with you, because we are working on enhancing our e-services with the public. But if you need to contact the local servicing office, go to our webpage here. On the first landing page, you're going to scroll to the bottom of the screen and there'll be an option that says contact us. Once you hit that option, you're going to come to a second landing page. Scroll to the bottom of that page, and at the bottom of the page it will say office locator. And when you hit the office locator, what you'll see is what's going to appear on your screen, and you would just need to enter your zip code, hit the locate button, and that's going to bring up the information for your local servicing office. And most importantly, what you're going to have is that local 800 number to call that office directly, so you can let them know whatever your issue is, so that way, say for example, if you needed a replacement Social Security card, go ahead and call us. Let us know, and that way we can go ahead and schedule an appointment. So when you do arrive, you're not necessarily waiting to be seen by someone, because we are having to do social distancing in line and as well as in the office once you come in. So it may be a wait versus if you just contact us and go ahead and get on the schedule there for us. And of course, you can always call our national 800 number at 800-772-1213 to speak with a representative about whatever your issue may be. Okay, so now we're going to get to the good stuff. We're going to talk about, so you're thinking about retiring. What do you need to know? First of all, it's a very personal decision, because the right time for you to retire and to start receiving that Social Security benefit, what's right for you may not necessarily be right for your coworker, a brother or a sister. You have to figure out what is best for you and your family. And that comes down to figuring out what's the right age to start to take that benefit. At Social Security, the earliest age that you can start to receive a Social Security benefit is at age 62. Keep in mind that if you start that benefit early at age 62, the benefit is reduced. That is a permanent reduction over the lifetime of the benefit. And then the only potential increases that you're looking at receiving are going to be those cost of living or COLA increases. And those are usually determined late September, October timeframe. And that's done by the Bureau of Statistics, where they're going to take a look at the last 3 quarters of inflation to see if it has risen to the level that would warrant an increase in benefits. And if that's the case, then the beneficiaries would see that new payment amount in the benefit that they would receive in January of the following year. Another consideration that you want to think about is, do you plan to work after you start to receive that Social Security benefit? Because if you are under your full retirement age, meaning if you started taking that benefit early at age 62, and you go back to work, there's going to be an earnings limit that you need to be aware of, because if you go over that, then you're going to be overpaid, and then we're going to ask you to pay back some of the benefits that you received from Social Security. Another consideration is Medicare. Do you plan to enroll in Medicare? Keep in mind that Medicare is not mandatory. However, if you do not enroll in Medicare at the very first opportunity that you have to enroll, then you could be subject to a 10% penalty for every 12 months that you wait or delay in enrolling in Medicare when you do decide to sign up. And then finally, which will be my next topic, I want to talk about My Social Security account. If you do not already have a My Social Security account, I want to take this time to encourage you to create a My Social Security account for yourself. How you're going to do that is, of course, come to our webpage at socialsecurity.gov, and there's going to be an icon on that page that says My Social Security. You want to click on that link. If you already have a My Social Security account, then that's your opportunity to log in your account and see your information. But if you don't, now going forward, we're going to have to verify your identity to create this account for you. And you're going to do that by either utilizing ID.me or deciding to utilize login.gov. And they will verify your identity. And once we verify that the correct person is trying to create this account, and you've passed all of the security hurdles, then at that point, you would have access to your Social Security information. And that's going to take you to the My Social Security landing page. What you should see when you arrive at that page, you'll see your estimated benefit at age 62, your full retirement age, and then all the way up until age 70. Also, there will be some really cool things that you can do on this page, such as if you need a replacement Social Security card, you can now log into your My Social Security account, provide us with some information from your state issued driver's license or ID card. And currently 45 states are approved for this process. And once you provide that information, you'll get 2 emails from us. The first email states that we received your request for the replacement Social Security card. The second email comes in about a week later, which says we processed your request for the replacement Social Security card. And then after it says we processed it, then you'll receive that new replacement Social Security card in about 10 to 14 business days. Also on that landing page, there's a new calculator there that lets you do a lot of what-if scenarios. So say, for example, that if you're deciding to retire at, say, 65 in 11 months, you can plug in that information, or you can utilize the sliding scale that's available there for you to go up and down the estimated benefit amount, and it'll let you know exactly how much that benefit would be for you. If you're somebody who's receiving Social Security disability, you go back to work, you can now report your wages through the My Social Security portal. If you need a benefit verification letter, say, for example, you're purchasing a new home and the bank is asking for verification of any income you get from Social Security. Well, you don't have to call us for that. Just simply log into your account, click on the request to get that benefit verification letter, and then you can print that out from the comforts of your own home. Now, in addition to some of those things, other things that you can do behind the My Social Security portal is you can check your earnings history. What this is going to allow you to see when you're looking at this information is a particular year and the gross amount that was reported for that year for you. And if you notice that there is a discrepancy, that your earnings are not right, that were reported to Social Security, this is a great opportunity for you to upload either a W-2 or a tax return. Send that to us. We'll get an alert. We'll take a look at that information, and then we'll correct it as necessary, because when it comes time for us to calculate that benefit for you, that corrected earnings amount may make a difference for you. Other things that you can do, you can update your address. your telephone number, start or change direct deposit. You can also review copies of letters that you received from Social Security, and we call those notices, so you'll see those in your repository. If you need a replacement Medicare card or a 1099 or 1042 for tax purposes, you can get those from here as well. In addition to everything that you see on the screen, also, if you filed for retirement, Medicare, disability, or if you filed an appeal, you can track the status of your application through your My Social Security account, because it'll tell you you're at like step 2 of 4 throughout the process. And then once it has been adjudicated to completion, then at that point, you would be able to see that letter or that notice in your repository there for you. Last year, our agency kind of updated some of our fact sheets, and they created these new age-related fact sheets for the different groups, such as for individuals between 18 to 48, 49 to 60, 61 to 69, and then individuals who are age 70 or older, because these new fact sheets are going to help you to kind of plan for your retirement, so you can kind of take a look at the things that you maybe should be thinking about as you're preparing to leave the workforce. In addition to these fact sheets, we also have fact sheets related to the windfall elimination provision, or WEP, or the government pension offset, as well as some fact sheets for Medicare for individuals. And I believe on the screen here is going to be an example of what one of those age-related fact sheets looks like. And of course, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to refer you to our website to get, again, the most current information and just seeing the basic information that you need to know as a good starting point for your planning for your retirement. Okay, so how do you qualify for a retirement benefit? Well, the short answer is we all know that we must work, right? But most importantly, we need to be working for an employer that's paying into Social Security, who's paying those FICA taxes or that Social Security tax for you. And the way that you're going to know if you're paying Social Security taxes is to look at your pay stub or your leaving earnings statement. And as long as you see Social Security taxes or FICA taxes, then you know you are contributing into Social Security. So for this year, for 2022, each $1,510 in earnings, that gives you 1 credit. You can earn a maximum of 4 credits per year. So as long as you gross at least $6,040 for this year, then at the end of the year, you would get your 4 quarters of coverage. And the minimum requirement to get a retirement benefit from Social Security is to have those 40 credits or quarters of coverage. And basically what that is saying is for you is that you must have, at a minimum, worked paying into Social Security for 10 years. And as long as you've done that, then when you're age 62 or older and you come to apply for this benefit, you would get something from Social Security. But let's look at how we determine how we're going to calculate that benefit. First of all, what you need to understand is that your wages are going to be adjusted for different changes in the levels over time. All that's saying is that if you had earnings in the 1970s, those wages are going to be calculated just a little bit differently from the wages of today. The most important piece or step here is step number 2. And step number 2, this is where we pull in the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. These are not consecutive years, just the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. And there's a misconception here that some people seem to think that it is the last 5 or the last 10 years. Not true. The highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. And then when we pull that into the calculation, the result is going to be the average index monthly earnings, or what that estimated benefit would be for you. Now, say, for example, you're that person who only did the bare minimum, that you only worked and got those 40 quarters of coverage. Well, we're going to pull in those 10 years of earnings for you. But what you need to understand is attached to those 10 years of earnings will be 25 years of zeros, because the calculation is always based upon the highest 35 years of earnings over your lifetime. And of course, the more 0 years you have in that calculation, the lower that benefit amount would be for you from Social Security. And that's going to be that base requirement there. Now, earlier I mentioned the earliest point that you can start to take your benefit from Social Security is at age 62. Keep in mind that if you do take that benefit early, there is a permanent reduction on your benefit. but say that you're trying to reach your full retirement age. That is going to be based upon your year of birth. So take a moment to look at the screen, find your year of birth, and the middle column will be your full retirement age. What that means is that if you wait until that particular age to come to Social Security to start to receive your benefit, then you would be receiving 100% of your benefit. If you take your benefit early at age 62, the last column shows how much of a reduction it would be on that benefit. So someone like myself, I fall in the 1960 or later column when I was born. My full retirement age is 67. If I decided to take my benefit early at 62, then I'm looking at receiving 70% of my benefit because there's going to be a 30% reduction because I'm taking my benefit early. I have an example here on the screen that gives an example of an individual whose full retirement age is 66. And in this example, they're going to receive $1,000 a month at their full retirement age. If this person decides to take this benefit early at age 62, then instead of receiving that $1,000 a month, he or she is looking at receiving $750 a month because of the reduction, that 25% reduction. But let's just say that person at age 66, they're not ready to retire yet. They want to continue working, and that's great. They don't have to take their benefit once they receive their full retirement age, but they're trying to get to age 70 to the max out point. Well, they would earn what we call at Social Security are delayed retirement credits. What this means is that for every 12 months that you wait or delay in taking your Social Security benefit past your full retirement age, you earn 8% for every 12 months that you wait. So if this person decided to wait trying to max out that benefit all the way up until age 70, then instead of receiving $1,000 a month, this person is looking at receiving $1,320 per month. And that's going to be the gross amount of the benefit. Social Security, we do not withhold taxes from your Social Security benefit unless you ask us to do so. Then at that point, we would withhold federal taxes from your Social Security benefit, but that's only if you ask us to do so. Now, in addition to the primary number holder, who else can receive a benefit? Well, of course, your children, as long as he or she is age 18 or 19 and still in high school, or if you have a child that is not married and we're able to determine that they became disabled before the age of 22, they also would be eligible to receive a benefit off of your record. In addition to your child, we have your spouse. As long as he or she is age 62 or older with little or no work history, and as long as we can determine that you and that person were married for at least a year or more, but in actuality it's 9 months. So as long as we can figure out that you and that person have been married for at least 9 months or longer, then they would be eligible for a benefit, or they could receive a benefit at any age, as long as they're caring for that child that is under the age of 16 or disabled. And let's take a moment to look at the spousal benefit computation. What could your spouse potentially receive off of your record? Well, your spouse could potentially receive up to half of whatever your benefit is at your full retirement age, but that is only if your spouse is at his or her full retirement age. Now, if they come to Social Security early, say at age 62, then instead of receiving up to 50%, they're looking at receiving approximately 30% of your benefit. But in order for them to even receive a cash benefit off of your record, number one, that primary number holder, they must have applied for and started to receive their benefit. There's a misconception that a lot of people seem to think that that the spousal benefit reduces what the primary number holder would receive. That is not true. It does not reduce what the primary number holder would receive. And now, because of some changes that happened with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, what we always do is we look to see, number one, can the spouse get a benefit off of their own Social Security number or own Social Security benefit first? If whatever they could receive, if it is less than half of their spouse's benefit amount at his or her full retirement age, we can combine those two amounts to get that person up to half or 50%. But again, that is only if your spouse is at his or her full retirement age in order to be eligible for this. Let's just take a look here at a moment again. So we're going to see, to figure out what your spouse's full retirement age is. Of course, we're going to have their year of birth. You're going to come to the next column to find their full retirement age. This third column is going to use that same example of the primary number holders of benefit is $1,000 a month, also showing that if he or she were to take it early, say at age 62, how much it would be reduced by. But the last column here shows that if the spouse is eligible for a benefit, the most that they could get off of this person's record would be $500, because if the primary numbers holder benefit is $1,000 a month, so half of that would be $500. And then of course it shows how much it would be reduced by if that spouse decided to take that benefit early at age 62. Now, in addition to a current spouse who may be able to draw a benefit off of your record, we do have a benefit for divorced spouses. But in order for a divorced spouse to qualify for a benefit, they got to meet certain criteria, meaning number one, they had to have been married to this person for 10 years or longer, currently not married, age 62 or older. And in this scenario, the person that you're divorced from, that ex-spouse, all he or she needs to be is entitled to a Social Security, either retirement or disability benefit. They do not have to be receiving it. They just need to be age 62 or older and eligible for either that retirement or disability benefit. Again, what we look to see is what can that person get off of his or her own record first. And then if it is less than half of their divorced spouse's amount, we can combine the two amounts to get that person up to the 50% marker here for that individual. And I do have a couple of examples here coming up for us. First up, I have Ricky and Lucy. So Ricky, in this example, he's receiving $1,200 a month. Half of that is $600. His wife, Lucy, comes in and she files for benefits. But off of her own record, she's eligible for $1,000 a month. Well, we know that $1,000 is more than $600. It's more than half. So in this particular situation, Lucy would not qualify for a spousal benefit because she can get a higher benefit off of her own record. And that's pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at our second example here. In our second example, we have Luke and Laura. So Laura, she's filing for benefits, and off of her own record, she's eligible to receive $1,800 a month. Half of that is $900. Her husband, Luke, he's already receiving benefits off of his own record in the amount of $600 a month. Now, because Laura has filed and she has started to receive her $1,800 a month, this opens up the window for Luke to be able to receive an additional $300 from Laura's record. And that's going to get him up to that $900 month mark, that half of her benefit amount. Now, if they had any eligible children, they also would be eligible to receive a benefit off of Laura's record. With some of the changes with the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2015, if for some reason Laura were to decide to suspend her benefit, stop receiving her Social Security benefit, if she stops receiving her $1,800 a month, that extra $300 a month that Luke is receiving, that will stop for Luke as well. If they have any eligible children that are receiving benefits off of Laura's record, that would stop for the children as well. The exception to this will be the divorced spouse. The divorced spouse would still be able to continue to receive their benefit off of the record. Now I want to take a moment to transition and talk about what happens when your spouse pass away, what potential benefits are available. Well, we're going to look at survivor's benefits. So who's eligible? First up, you have your children. As long as they are age 18 or 19 and still in high school, they would be eligible for survivor's benefit. Or if you have that disabled child that's not married and we determine that is disabled before the age of 22, they also would be eligible to receive a benefit. Then we have the widow, the widower, or the divorced widow or widower. So what potential benefit could they receive? Well, they can start to receive reduced benefits as early as age 60, or if they could wait until their full retirement age, they can get full benefits at the full retirement age, or they can receive benefits at any age if they're caring for a child that is under the age of 16 or disabled. And the last bullet here just talks about divorced widows or widowers may qualify. All that's saying here is that a divorced spouse may qualify for a survivor's benefit as long as they meet that divorced spouse's criteria of being married to that person for at least 10 years or longer, age 62 or older, and currently unmarried. They also would qualify for a widow or widower's benefit. So let's take a look to see what could they potentially receive. Well, with a survivor's benefit, if someone comes and applies for this benefit as early as age 60, then they're eligible to receive 71.5% of the deceased worker's amount. And if somebody starts to take this benefit at age 60, then when he or she turns age 62, we at Social Security, we need to look to see, can this person get a higher benefit off of their own record? And if so, then we would switch them to the higher benefit amount. Now, if a person waits until age 62 to start to receive the survivor's benefit, then they're looking at receiving 82.5% of the deceased worker's amount. If a person waits until their full retirement age, they're looking at receiving 100% of the deceased worker's amount. This allows them the opportunity to continue to let their benefit continue to grow up until age 70. Then at age 70, we at Social Security, we need to circle back around, take another look to see, can this person get a higher benefit off of their own record at age 70? And if that is the case, we would switch them to the higher benefit. And then the last bullet here just talks about that full benefits are available to both the widow, the widower, and the divorced widow or widower. All this is saying is that if the person who passed away, if they had a current spouse, that person would be eligible for a benefit. And if they had someone that they were divorced from that meets the divorced spouse's criteria, they also would be eligible for a benefit. So both of them would be eligible to draw a survivor's benefit off of that number holder's record. And I will address a couple of the questions in the chat here once I get to an appropriate point. I do see you, but I will take care of those questions for you. Now, one of the questions I always get asked is, can I work and still receive my Social Security benefit? The short answer is yes, you can, but you need to know what you're up against. So if you are under your full retirement age and you start to take a benefit from Social Security, whether it is a retirement benefit or a survivor's benefit, if you're under your full retirement age and you go back to work, the earnings limit for this year, for 2022, is that you can work and earn up to $19,560 for the year, and that equates out to $1,630 for the month. As long as you don't go over, you're good to go. But if you do, we're going to send you a letter in the mail letting you know that we paid you too much money, and then we at Social Security, we're going to have our handout saying you need to pay us back $1 for every 2 that you went over. Now, in the year that you're going to reach your full retirement age, that earnings limit, it goes up. It goes up to $51,960 for the year, or $4,330 per month. Again, as long as you do not go over, you are golden. But if you do, we got our handout saying, excuse me, you need to pay us back $1 for every 3 that you went over. So say, for example, that this year I'm going to reach my full retirement age and I'm going to reach it in August. What that means for me is that if I'm receiving my Social Security benefit, I can work and earn from January 1st through July 31st, $51,960 for the year. As long as I don't go over, I'm good to go. I'm good to go. But if I do, I already know I got to start counting out my dollar bills because I got to pay back to Social Security $1 for every 3 that I went over. Now, when August the 1st comes around, at that point, there is no limit to how much I can work and earn. I can make $1 million. Social Security will not care about how much that I work and earn. But I usually tell people, but at this point, IRS is probably going to have their hand out because then they're going to want their piece of the pie because they're going to say, you owe us taxes now. So just be aware of this. And one of the things I want to mention that when I'm talking about this earnings limit that is on the screen, I am not talking about any pension benefit, any annuity, VA benefits, anything like that. I am strictly talking about you going back to work, working for an employer who is going to pay Social Security and FICA taxes for you, or you being self-employed, going back to work for yourself. Not talking about any other type of income, strictly you going back to work here. The other thing that people usually will ask about this, because sometimes they'll say, well, I started my benefit early at age 62, but I decided to get a little part-time job and I stayed up under the earnings limit. But my question to you is, what happens to those new earnings? Well, what I'm going to tell you is this: when you reach your full retirement age, at that point, we at Social Security, we do another look at your high 35 years of earnings. So we're going to recalculate that benefit to see if these new earnings, if they make a difference in your calculation. If they do, you will receive a letter from Social Security that will say something to the gist of this. This is what we paid you. This is what we should have paid you. We send you the difference in the money, and then you start to receive a new higher monthly benefit amount. So we do recalculate those benefits, but we do it once you reach your full retirement age here. The other question that I always get is my Social Security benefit taxable? My answer is, it depends. And we're going to have to figure out what your combined income is to do that. And we're going to do this by taking your adjusted gross income, adding to that any non-taxable interest that you may have, add whatever your Social Security benefit is, cut it in half and add that to the pot, and that gives you your combined income. With that combined income, we need to figure out, are you filing your taxes as a member of a couple, or are you filing as an individual? If you are an individual, and if that combined income is less than $25,000, you do not pay taxes on the Social Security benefit. If the combined income is between $25,000 to $34,000, you may pay taxes on up to 50% of your Social Security benefit. And if the combined income is more than $34,000, you could pay taxes on up to 85% of your Social Security benefit. And we like to make people aware of this, because this is not a Social Security regulation, but this is an IRS regulation. And for more information about this, you may want to visit irs.gov looking for publication number 554, which is the tax guide for seniors. Also, I would want to kind of recommend to you, maybe seek out, especially when you're planning for retirement, talking to your financial advisor and thinking about all of the different scenarios or situations that may pop up, so you don't run into any unexpected surprises here. So how are you going to contact us when it is time to retire? Well, of course, the easiest way is to log into your My Social Security account so that you can apply online through your My Social Security account. The other option is to call either your local servicing Social Security office or the national 800 number so we can schedule a telephone appointment with you. And you can rest assured, either way, you're going to be asked the same series of questions. Then at the end of the interview, if we need anything from you, we're going to let you know. If we need to see a marriage certificate, a divorce decree, financial information to establish that direct deposit for you, we'll tell you everything that we're going to need. If you filed online, then based upon your zip code, that will tell you what local servicing office you need to get that information to. If you're talking to a representative on the phone, then they're going to direct you on how to get that information directly to them so that they can finish processing your claim. Usually here is where I tell people that if you haven't paid attention to anything I've said thus far, why don't you listen now so you can figure out when you're going to get your money from Social Security. So one of the first things you need to understand is that Social Security, we do not pay for partial months of benefits. You have to be that age throughout the month. So if you're born on the first or the second day of that month, we give you credit for that month. The next thing you need to understand is that benefits are paid the month following the month that they're due. So say, for example, you come to Social Security this month in May and you want your benefits to start in May. That means you don't get your first check until June because we pay 1 month behind. Then depending on what your day of birth is, that will determine what Wednesday of the month your check will be deposited into your bank account. So if your birth date is the 1st through the 10th, that's the second Wednesday of the month. The 11th through the 20th is the third Wednesday of the month. The 21st through the 31st is the fourth Wednesday of the month. So kind of pay attention to that, especially when you're planning for your financial future. And I'm going to pause here for just a moment because I do want to go to the chat to see if I have any questions here. Okay, someone is saying, asking for a colleague, need clarification about WEP or the windfall elimination provision, the $500 per month. If she receives a TRS pension but worked 4 years for the district that did not pay into Social Security, this person has less than 20 years of substantial earnings because of being self-employed. And I guess this is been in the school system most of her career, and she paid into Social Security her entire life, except for the 4 years that she worked for a Georgia school district, but did not pay into Social Security. Let me just break this down for you. And I know somebody else is going to talk about this momentarily right behind you. But the key with Social Security in determining whether or not WEP is going to apply to you is, number one, do you have the 40 quarters of coverage with Social Security? How you're going to know if you have your 40 quarters of coverage? Well, that's going to be easy. If you log into your My Social Security account and you see a estimated benefit amount that you're going to get from Social Security, number one, you know you have the 40 quarters of coverage. So you know you're going to get something from Social Security. The other piece to this is we have to look to see how many years of substantial earnings that you have. If you have 30 or more years of substantial earnings, and this is, we do have a fact sheet that is listed on our webpage, and I will make sure that Ms. Karen gets another copy of this. And then I also have a really good chart called If You're Worker A or Worker B that talks about the 40 quarters, and it leads you down a flow chart to determine whether or not the windfall elimination provision or the government pension offset would apply for you. But the other thing that we need to look to see, do you have 30 or more years of substantial earnings? If you have 30 or more years of substantial earnings, then in essence, what that does is wipe out the windfall. So therefore you get your whole Social Security benefit. If you have less than 30 years of substantial earnings, depending on how many years of substantial earnings that you have, there would be a reduction on the Social Security benefit. And it really comes down to how many years that you have. And we do have a really great calculator on our My Social Security page. That is the windfall elimination calculator that's going to ask you for some information. I think it asks for, I want to say, it's your date of birth. It's going to ask for how much of a pension are you going to get from an employer, whether it's a school system or a government entity that did not pay into Social Security. How much is that pension amount? Then it asks you to input all of the years that you had earnings where you did pay into Social Security. Then you go to the bottom and you calculate, and it shows the reduction of how much that benefit would be. But I know I'm probably jumping into someone else's area, so I'm going to stop here because I get carried away with that. But I will make sure I send those fact sheets to everyone. So just hold on the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. And basically those are WEP questions that someone is having here. So I'm going to wait on those. So let me just go on into Medicare. With Medicare, Social Security, we do two things. Number one, we are the federal agency that when it is time for you to enroll in Medicare, we are who you contact to enroll. Number two, if you are age 65 or older and receiving a cash benefit from Social Security, then we are going to be the agency that will deduct those premiums out of your Social Security benefit, and we send that over to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services for you. So in essence, I tell people that we're very limited what we do with regards to Medicare. Number one, we take your application, and then number two, we take your money when it comes to Medicare. So those are going to be the two things that we do. So let's look at who can get Medicare. First and foremost, it is anyone who is age 65 or older. If you've been on Social Security disability for 24 months or longer, anyone with ALS, or sometimes called the Lou Gehrig's disease, and then finally those individuals who have permanent kidney failure and receives maintenance dialysis or a kidney transplant will be the individuals who would be eligible to receive Medicare. With Medicare, there are a couple of different enrollments that you need to be aware of. The first up is called the initial enrollment period, and sometimes you'll hear people say the IEP. What this is your very first opportunity that you get to enroll in Medicare. This is a 7-month window. It is 3 months before you turn age 65, your birthday month, and then 3 months after that. That is the very first chance that you can enroll in Medicare. The next enrollment period that people will talk about is called a special enrollment period. And what the special enrollment period says is that if you are age 65 or older and you are covered under a group healthcare plan, either your own or your spouse's, then when it is time for you to leave employment, then you have a 8-month window to contact Social Security so that you can enroll in Medicare and that be considered timely. The last enrollment period is the general enrollment period, and that's called the GEP. And that is every single year from January 1st through January 1st through March 31st. One of the things that we at Social Security look at with the general enrollment period is we always have to determine if somebody missed their initial enrollment period, and if they don't qualify for a special enrollment period, this is where the general enrollment period comes into play. We also look to see, is this person going to have a penalty, going back to see when was the very first opportunity they could have enrolled in Medicare. Currently, when you enroll in the general enrollment period, as of right now, the coverage will be effective in July of the same year. There's some good news coming, because starting next year, as far as the general enrollment period for individuals, that if they miss the initial or the special enrollment period, when they contact us to enroll, then at whatever point they contact us starting next year, then that coverage will be effective the next month. So there won't be waiting all the way up until July starting next year. So we're really excited about that for individuals, so you don't have to wait those additional months and missing out on being able to get the health care that you need. With Medicare, there are a couple of different parts. Part B, with when it starts, especially if you're in your initial enrollment period. So we have to look to see when would that coverage become effective if you're enrolling in the IEP. If you enroll in Medicare 3 months before you turn age 65, the coverage starts when you reach age 65 or in your birthday month. If you wait until your birthday month to enroll in Medicare, the coverage starts 1 month later. It starts the next month. If you wait 1 month after you turn age 65, coverage starts 2 months down the road. If you wait 2 or 3 months after you reach age 65, then that coverage starts 3 months down the road. And that's currently as of right now. But again, starting next year, some of those rules are going to be changed just a little bit. Okay, with Medicare, the parts that we need to be aware of. We have original or traditional Medicare. With that consists of Part A, which is your hospital insurance. And for most people, Part A, we do not pay for it, because as long as you have that minimum requirement of 40 quarters of coverage, Part A will not cost you anything. But if you have less than 40 quarters of coverage, you would have to pay a monthly premium for Part A. And it's really going to depend on how many quarters of coverage that you have to determine the amount that you would pay. Now with Part B, everybody has to pay for Part B. The base premium for Part B is $170.10. If you are someone who is a higher wage earner, in addition to paying the base premium, you would have to pay an additional surcharge for Part B if you are a higher wage earner. And I'll discuss that just a little bit later on. And with original Medicare, which you can add on if you choose to do so, is a Part D or a prescription drug plan. Right now, the average cost of a Part D plan is going to be roughly about $34 that you can add on. And that is in addition to that Part B premium. Also, if you go with original Medicare, you can choose to get you a supplemental coverage insurance or a Medigap plan if you have original Medicare. The other option is to have a Medicare Advantage plan or a Part C plan. What the Advantage Plan is private companies that are following the rules and regulations for the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And normally what they like to do is to bundle together Part A, Part B, Part D, and then they'll throw in something extra like a gym membership or dental or hearing plan, all for a predetermined price. The cost is going to vary from provider to provider. This is where I tell people you have to do your due diligence. Where you want to start is going to Medicare.gov, so you can figure out which is the best. Do you want traditional Medicare or do you want an Advantage plan? And then you have to figure out what is each going to cover for you in determining whether or not you need Medicare. Especially those individuals when you're getting ready to retire, it's very important that you're making sure that you're following, talking to somebody in HR to determine whether or not the school system is going to require that you do enroll in Medicare, whether the TRS requires that or not. That's something that you're going to have to find out for yourself to make sure that you are enrolling timely, because otherwise you could be subject to that 10% penalty. And that 10% penalty is a permanent penalty on the Medicare premium that would be assessed for individuals over the lifetime that you're enrolled in Medicare. Now, I do have a couple of scenarios here before I kind of wrap this up for you this morning. First up, this scenario talks about that if a person has started to receive their Social Security cash benefit early, say at age 62, then when they turn age 65, does he or she need to contact Social Security to enroll in Medicare? The answer is no, because we're going to automatically enroll you in Medicare. What will happen is 3 months before you reach age 65, you get a letter in the mail from Social Security where we're letting you know that we've already enrolled you in Medicare. We're going to give you that red, white, and blue card, that Medicare card, showing that you're enrolled in both Parts A and B. And then the next thing you're going to notice is that we're going to start deducting those premiums out of your Social Security benefit. So you don't have to do anything in this scenario because we're going to take care of everything for you. The next scenario talks about that if a person is still working at age 65, and as long as you are covered under a group healthcare plan, either your own or your spouse's, then you may have options here. I usually tell people to talk to somebody in HR again to see, does the school system require that you enroll in Medicare? If they don't, consider enrolling in Medicare Part A only and just say, I don't want to take Part B right now because I have insurance through my employer. That way, when it is time for you to retire, that will start that 8-month clock for you to contact Social Security to enroll in Medicare, and it still be considered timely. And please pay attention to the note that is in the middle of the screen, that if a high deductible health savings account, if that is part of your benefit package, what that is saying here is that if you have this high deductible health savings account where you're contributing to that, you must stop those contributions 6 months before you can enroll in Medicare Part A. Simply because if you don't, there could be IRS tax implications that you may be assessed with, and you don't want that. You can use whatever's in the account, you just can't add any more to that high deductible health savings account, and you have to stop those contributions 6 months before you can enroll in Medicare. Okay, a couple other things that you need to know, that when you're still working, normally we try to tell people 2 to 3 months before you're ready to retire, contact us. Go ahead and download 2 forms from our website, the L564. This is the employer form. What this does is this verifies that you always had health insurance coverage. It's going to show us when the coverage started and the expected end date of that coverage. The other form that you must complete with that is going to be the CMS Form 40B. That's the actual application. And when you send these forms back, please send these forms back together. They are married. They're peanut butter and jelly. They're peas and carrots. They have to go together to come back to us, because if you send one without the other, it's going to delay us enrolling you in Medicare timely, and we cannot go back retroactively. We have to process it from whatever point that we get both forms in together. And like I said, failure to enroll timely could result in a 10% penalty, and that 10% penalty is over the lifetime that you are enrolled in Medicare, and that's plus paying that premium for the Medicare as well. The next situation here talks about that if a person is not working at age 65 and they have not started to take their cash benefit from Social Security, then they can file what we call as a Medicare only application. They're going to contact us, file that application, and then what's happening is that they will receive a bill in the mail where the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services sends you a quarterly bill to pay your Medicare premiums. If you find that you can't pay 3 months worth of Medicare premiums in advance, Medicare does have other options. One is called Medicare Easy Pay, where you're going to provide them with some financial information for either a checking or a savings account, and they'll debit that account on a monthly basis. The other option is to go to Medicare's website, create a My Medicare account. This allows you to log in and then pay your premiums online directly to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Also, you'll get to see and verify that your premiums are current and up to date. Here's just an example of or a snippet of what our webpage is going to look like. So when you do go for the Medicare information, you're going to see all of the links to the CMS Form 40B as well as the L564. Again, I just want to stress that when you're sending those forms back to us, make sure you send them both back to your local servicing office as soon as possible so that we can get that process for you. And the earliest point that you can apply for Medicare is going to be 3 months before you're ready to enroll. Now, earlier I mentioned that if you're a higher wage earner, in addition to the base or the standard premium for this year, that $170.10, you could have to pay an additional surcharge. That is going to be based upon your modified adjusted gross income, and we're going to get that from your tax return. To determine whether or not we're going to assess that surcharge, we look at your tax return from 2 years in the past. So for this year, for 2022, we look at your tax return from 2020 to determine whether or not additional surcharge would be assessed for Medicare Part B and for Part D. And if you are married and if both of you are enrolled in Medicare, that additional amount that you would need to pay is for each member of the couple, is what is on the screen. Here on the screen is just an example of the Medicare.gov website. So when you're needing extra information about Medicare, because normally you're going to be overwhelmed, I call it the Medicare tsunami. So about 6 months before you're ready to enroll in Medicare, you're going to start to receive text messages from companies, telephone messages, telephone calls, letters in the mail, because all of these different companies are going to be vying for your business. Where you need to start is come to Medicare.gov so you can do your own research to figure out what is the best option for you and which is the best way for you to go. Do you want traditional Medicare or do you want an Advantage plan? And then if you want an Advantage plan, you're going to need to figure out what's the best way for you to do that. Also, Medicare.gov is going to give you information on how to reach the Georgia SHIP, so that if you need assistance, that way they would be able to assist you and kind of talk you through the process. And the Georgia SHIP is going to be formerly known as Georgia Cares, where you would contact them. So if you were having kind of questions about which way do I go, they will kind of talk you through the process without leaning you one way or another, because they're not going to have a dog in the fight for you. Excuse me. Here on this screen, once you do create that My Medicare account, some of the things that you'd be able to see, number one, are your premiums current and up to date. You'd be able to see your claims menu, such as what is outstanding, what's been paid for you. Also, if you needed any assistance from customer service, you'd be able to click that link if you needed assistance from someone with Medicare. Here on the screen is going to be an example of what your Medicare card would look like. It now has a series of letters and numbers, and of course, showing what you're enrolled in, whether it's Part A or Part B or both, and the effective or the start date of that coverage. And I believe here, this is going to wrap up the base for my presentation today. I know there were questions earlier in the chat regarding the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, but I'm going to defer that to the subject matter expert who should be coming up shortly here. to speak on that. And I just want to say thank you for your time and for allowing me to be with you this morning. And Ms. Karen, I will send you that additional fact sheet on WEP, GPO, and the if you're worker A or worker B, that may help everybody. And thank you again for allowing me to be here.
Denise, thank you. I don't know if everybody else is feeling overwhelmed, but this is why we record these sessions, so people can go back and look at the various components and see what applies to your case to make the right decisions concerning retirement. And Anise, again, I'll share her contact information with you, and you can reach out to a representative in your own local Social Security office. So thank you so much for being here. We are going to have one of our GAE retired members, Judy Polachek, talk to us just a little bit about GPO WEP. And if you've not heard about it before, hopefully this will be a good introduction, and maybe it won't affect you. Anise was wonderful in sharing what Social Security benefits you might be entitled to, but unfortunately there are some people who don't receive their full Social Security benefits. And Judy, you're on.
Thank you. And I will try to be relatively brief because I know we're running late. Karen is going to start showing a PowerPoint and I will talk over it while it's showing. Anise really went through this, how we earn our Social Security credits. And in order to receive Social Security, you need to have worked 10 years or 40 credits, unless you are a spouse. And I'm going to go further into detail on that in a few minutes. Okay, the next one. All right, GPO and WEP. And those are the government pension offset and the windfall elimination provision. And again, I will be going into detail. GPO affects the spouse and WEP affects the worker. Karen, go ahead. Our capital, and there's going to be an emphasis on things happening in the capital, especially in May and thereafter. And we will talk about that in a few minutes. The next one. All right, believe it or not, there are actually 15 states that do not pay into Social Security for public employees such as teachers, firemen, policemen, and some others. And states like Georgia, which are in the navy blue, are kind of a hit or miss. Some of our counties do not pay into Social Security and others do. The red states around the United States do not at all pay into Social Security for the public employees such as teachers. And then the lighter blue all pay into it. In Georgia, the county that I worked in, DeKalb County, voted in 1970s, I believe it was before I started working for them, to opt out of Social Security. And I would say that the employees really did not understand the ramifications of opting out of Social Security. They were promised by DeKalb County to have monies paid into an annuity that was supposedly going to be pretty much equal to Social Security. And that turned out not to be the case. And actually in, believe it was 2008 or 2009, DeKalb County illegally stopped paying into this fund. So the teachers and other employees were left with nothing. And there was a lawsuit, and those people that worked with DeKalb did eventually win the lawsuit, but it still does not come close to equaling what we would have received if we'd stayed in Social Security. So next, Karen. These are the public sector jobs that I was talking about, where many people are not paying into Social Security. The next one. 1.9 million people nationally are affected by the WEP, and 56,000 in Georgia are affected by the government pension offset.
Actually, that should say WEP, Judy. I mistyped it. So both of these are numbers for the WEP.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that didn't really look right. Actually, for the GPO, it's 695,000 nationally that are affected. Or if we want to round it out, 700,000, that's fine. The next one. All right.
Windfall elimination, both of these are federal legislation provisions. And the WEP came into being in 1983.
Right. And I believe the GPO was in the late 70s. The next one. Okay. This shows you on your W-2 if you have paid into Social Security. And so that is the place to look. And it's also the place to look for Medicare. I know I started working with DeKalb County in 1985, and I did not realize until I retired, I guess that was maybe 5 years ago, that DeKalb had not paid into Medicare for me. What they said was I had been grandfathered in. They started paying into Medicare for their employees 6 months after I started working for DeKalb. So this is an example of why it's so important to keep your eyes on everything that shows what you're being paid and how you're being paid, because you don't want to get to be retirement age and have a big surprise. Next. Okay. WEP can take out half of your retirement. And we're going to get into how that happens next. All right, this is a government pension offset, and this came into being in 1977. And this is the one that really affects me. The next one. This takes about 2/3 of the spousal amount of Social Security I should receive. So that's a huge amount. And here are some examples. On GPO, if Ann's pension was $3,000, 2/3 of that, of course, is 2,000, and that's what they reduce Ann's spousal benefit. So what she would receive as a spouse is cut by 2/3. So my TRS, I am a retired paraprofessional, so my TRS is not what a certified gets, but it's decent. But 2/3 of that is taken out of what I should receive as a spouse. And it's really unfair because our spouses mine worked for over 60 years and paid into Social Security. And that money should rightly be his spouse's, but it's not because of GPO. So Anne, in this example, receives $200 a month instead of $2,200. The next.
So this is a 2-minute or so video, and it'll talk about TRS, but it's actually talking about the Texas retirement system, but the information being presented is as applicable in Texas as it is in Georgia. So let's take a look at this video.
Okay.
Meet Kim. Kim is an assistant principal at a middle school. She's been a TRS member for 12 years. Before becoming an educator, Kim worked as a public librarian for 11 years. While working for the city, Kim paid into the Social Security system. Since she began working for her school district, Kim has not paid into Social Security. Like most Texas school districts, her district does not participate in Social Security. That means Kim is only eligible for Social Security benefits based on her previous employment with the city and through her spouse, who has paid into Social Security for his entire career. Kim is currently reading up on 2 Social Security provisions that could reduce or even eliminate her Social Security benefits. The Windfall Elimination Provision, also known as WEP or WEP, and the Government Pension Offset, or GPO. Because Kim will receive a TRS pension for employment in which she did not pay Social Security taxes, the Social Security benefits she earned from her previous employment could be reduced by the WEP but not totally eliminated. The amount of the reduction depends on the amount of her earnings and the number of years she paid Social Security taxes. The GPO, however, could offset or even eliminate Kim's spousal benefits if she retires from her current employer. The GPO will reduce her spousal Social Security benefits by 2/3 of her TRS pension. If 2/3 of Kim's TRS pension exceeds the amount of her spousal benefits from Social Security, she will not receive a spouse or widow's Social Security benefit. If you or your spouse has paid into the Social Security system, contact a Social Security representative to determine if the WEP or GPO apply to you. Ask if there are any exceptions to the GPO that could eliminate the offset to your spousal benefits. Be prepared to balance out the potential effects of these provisions with personal savings when you retire.
Okay. There has been a lot of information being put out on social media lately. Actually, educators in Texas have been putting out a lot of kind of read my story postings to bring this out into the public's information. And I know I started reading about it on Facebook a few months ago. And since then, I have been so happy that that we are really getting people to notice this, I don't know what to call it, this issue that affects so many of us. NEA is once again becoming very active in working on this, on repealing the GPO WEP laws. It's very exciting because this is such an unfair thing. It affects mainly, the GPO affects mainly women and poorer women, women that aren't making large pensions. And the WEP affects all income people, just as it showed you with the principal in Texas. HR 82 is called the Social Security Fairness Act of 2021. It is a bipartisan act, which is really amazing in this day and age. And we have so far 272 representatives that have signed on to this act. We need 290 to get it on the floor of the US House of Representatives. And we are working on it constantly. We need as many co-sponsors as we can get. It's showing you here, Hank Johnson,
What,
Nikema Williams, Sanford Bishop, and Jody Heiss, our bipartisan Republican that's co-sponsoring this. So we need people to contact their representatives, tell them the importance of repealing these. It's just so important. We are closer to getting this voted on than we have ever been. So, and the month of May is the big month that across the country we are working on this. May 18th, a national group on repealing WEP and GPO is meeting in Washington, DC. They're meeting with our congressional representatives. And also in the month of May, we are setting up Zoom meetings with our Congress people. I believe NEA has designated May 20, there it is. May 24th is a day of action. And we can, Karen, can we put the information in the chat on how people connect?
I will, as I mentioned, send out an email document that will have links to all of the information covered today.
Okay, that's great. I'm proud to say that GAE is sending 2 of our retired people to Washington, DC for this important rally on May 18th. We're very excited about that. And I know that I am supposed to talk a little bit more about it. And
No, Yeah, I think we're towards the end. I put this last slide here and I'll send everybody in the audience the link to an older No magazine. And that has a great section in it. The No magazine being GAE's publication, quarterly publication, but this issue has information, a great article on the GPO and the WEP. So I just wanted people to know there are great resources. And the idea too that, oh, it doesn't affect me, I'm not in a system, my system takes out Social Security. Well, that's all well and good, but kind of what affects one affects us all. I've taught in two systems, Athens, Oconee County and Jefferson City. And while I have 36 quarters in Social Security, none of them were through teaching. And so I don't get any Social Security benefits. So Judy, I want to thank you for the information you shared, and I'll give people your contact info so that they can go through and contact you with questions. But
I just want to add one thing that people don't realize. And that is, I'd love to hear the TRS gives a COLA twice a year. TRS is the best pension system just about in the whole country. However, for those of us that are affected by GPO and WEP, Social Security deducts that COLA from our Social Security because they don't want us to get that little bit more a month more. It just always shocks me when it hits me, when I get that letter from Social Security wanting to know if I have received a COLA at all this year. So yeah, it's just kind of shocking. So please help us, even if it doesn't affect you. It will help so many of us that really need that extra bit of money that really should belong to us. So thank you, Karen.
thanks, Judy. Appreciate the information. Our last presenter, as promised, is Mike Zorum from TRS, the best retirement system, state pension retirement system in the nation, or so we claim. And Mike, thank you for being with us this morning. And we all look forward to the information you'll be sharing.
Great. Thanks, Karen. Let me go ahead and try and share my screen here.
Okay. Looks like you're up and running.
Let's see here. We'll do this. And hopefully you can all see the gentleman relaxing in his rowboat there.
Exactly.
Hopefully we're all going to have a comfortable retirement, secure retirement through TRS. You know better than I that being a teacher is a very challenging position, and you deserve a great benefit. And I meet with a lot of certified financial planners, licensed financial advisors. They all say the same thing. They wish they personally had TRS, and it's hard to get a better endorsement than that. Couple conceptual things. It's important to understand that your benefit is not tied to the ups and downs of the stock market. It's based on a formula that simply looks at how long you've worked and your high average salary. The longer you've worked under TRS, the higher your salary under TRS, the larger your lifetime benefit's going to be. Doesn't matter what the stock market does. So that alleviates a lot of the stress that a lot of folks have in planning for their retirement. It's guaranteed for life. It can't be taken away from you. We have retirees, I think over 9,000 that are 85 years plus, over 3,000 that are 90 plus, and we have over 70 that are 100 years old and still collecting from TRS. And right now we have a a lady retiree who's 107 and still collecting from TRS. So maybe she's drinking some of that North Georgia mountain water. Also, if you get a plan that leaves a survivor benefit, should you pass away first, your survivor's benefit is also guaranteed for life. And we'll talk about that shortly. There are a lot of different directions you can go with TRS. We have 7 different plans of retirement that you can choose from, and I'll go through each of those. We offer a cost of living adjustment, which was referred to earlier. As long as there's inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, we award a COLA. You also have to decide yes or no if you want what we call a partial lump sum option plan, which is a lump sum distribution of cash in lieu of a reduced benefit. So a lot of different directions and decisions to make. But the bottom line is, if you want a standard of living in retirement that's equivalent to what you have now, the experts say in general you need to replace 80% of your pre-retirement income in order to do that. Of course, having more would be wonderful, and a lot of TRS retirees do. But when you take your TRS benefit, you take your Social Security benefit to the extent you're going to be receiving one, plus your 403B or 401k or 457, depending on what your school system offers. When you add all those things together, along with any other personal savings, the idea would be that you cross this 80% income replacement threshold. Here's the formula that we use to compute your benefit. We take your years of creditable service, and creditable service is your day-to-day membership in your day-to-day work, your unused sick leave credit, and service purchases. And we add all those together, and you can have partial years. We award service credit in 1/9 based on the old 9-month teacher contract. And we're going to go into each of those 3 categories later, but we add them all together, get your total years, and then we multiply that by 2%. Then we look at your whole TRS career from beginning to end, and we say, where in that career did you have your highest consecutive 24 months of pay? And that is what we call your high average salary. So we plug that into the formula, and when we multiply it all together, we get the basic benefit under what we call Plan A maximum. That's the most that you can get from TRS. All the other plans that we offer are going to be an actuarial reduction from whatever your maximum benefit is. About 6 to 7 out of 10 of our retirees take the maximum plan. That doesn't make it right or wrong for you. It just gives you an idea of what other teachers are doing. Some nice things happen once you start getting a check from TRS. Well, number one, you're retired. Congratulations. You can do all those things you wanted to in retirement. But certain deductions that you were used to having from your active teacher check don't come out of your TRS retirement check. And one of those is TRS doesn't come out of your TRS check, and that saves you 6% right off the bat. There are no payroll taxes out of your TRS check. So there's no Social Security, there's no old age survivor, there's no Medicare, and all those things added up are over 7.5%. Don't come out that many of you are used to seeing deducted. Your 403B deduction will not come out. Once you're age 62 and living in Georgia, retired, the first $35,000 of your TRS income is not subject to state tax. And that's 5% or so for most of us. Then once you're age 65, living in Georgia, your state tax exemption jumps to $65,000. So the vast majority of TRS retirees living in Georgia, 65 plus, aren't paying any state tax on their TRS income. So when you add up all those deductions that aren't coming out, it really helps make your take-home pay in retirement look closer to your take-home pay while you are actively working. Now, there is one deduction that I'm sure most of you want to see continue, and that's for your state health benefit plan, which by law you can keep. And you don't have to do anything anymore. As long as you have that coverage prior to retirement, you will automatically carry it into retirement, and the deductions start coming out of your TRS check. You don't have an open enrollment in retirement, but you do have what they call a retiree option change period, where they allow you to change options. So you could, for example, go from United Healthcare to Anthem, or from gold to bronze, what have you. So be aware of that. You can still have qualifying events in retirement that allow you to make changes to your plan, but you have to do them timely. For example, if you get married, you have, I think it's 30 days to add a new spouse, for example. But if you pull out of the state health benefit plan in retirement, you cannot get back in. So it's different than when you are actively working. Oh, I should also mention that TRS does not administer the state health benefit plan. That's done through the Department of Community Health, the division of the state health benefit plan. And they're your expert for answers to your questions on eligibility and coverage. All TRS does is take the money out of your TRS check and we send it back to the health plan. So you can retire when you have 30 years of service at any age. I talked to some teachers who are, 47, 48, and they have a 30-year benefit because they started right out of college at a young age and never had any sick days, and they might have 2 or 3 years of unused sick leave credit. The other threshold would be for someone who started their teaching career late, and once they turn age 60, they have 10 or more years of creditable service. You could get out at that point too. If you become disabled and can't do your job as determined by the TRS medical board and your providers, then provided you have at least 10 years of creditable service, you can get retirement starting at any age with no sort of early retirement penalty. So here are the retirement plans. They can be bunched into 2 groups. There's those that do not provide a monthly benefit if you pass away first. That's Plan A maximum and Plan B option 1. Then on the other hand, we have options 2 through 4 that leave varying amounts of money to one or more beneficiaries should you pass away first. Basically, the more you leave other people, the less you're going to get. And the more you decide you want for yourself, the less would be available for your surviving beneficiaries. So let's go back to Plan A maximum. This is the formula that we saw earlier. You take your years of creditable service times the 2% times your high average salary, and that's your maximum. So most of us could do that in our head. Now, moving on to Plan B option 1, conceptually, it's important to understand that in your TRS account, there are 2 buckets of money. There's the bucket of money where all your checks went into plus the interest we paid. Let's call that your bucket of money. And then there's the TRS bucket of money where all your employer contributions went and where all the return on investment went when we put everyone's contributions into the stock and bond market. We pay your very first benefit checks out of your bucket of money. And that bucket of money lasts about 2 to 3 years. And then when that bucket runs out, your lifetime benefit is paid out of the TRS bucket of money. So going back to the maximum plan, if you pass away before all your money is used up, we would refund in a lump sum what's ever left in your bucket to your designated beneficiary. Now, hopefully we're all going to live well past 2 or 3 years in retirement, and we're not going to have anything left in our bucket when we pass away. So, after that 2 to 3 year period, there would be no money left over to leave in a lump sum, but we never keep any of the money that came out of your paycheck. So if there is any money left over in your bucket, we would give it away to your designated beneficiary in a lump sum. Now, having said that, we change it up a little bit for Plan B option 1, in that your very first benefit checks come out of both buckets of money, the TRS bucket and your bucket. So consequently, your bucket of money lasts longer. Instead of the 2 to 3 years, it lasts under the maximum plan, it lasts 10 to 14 years under Plan B option 1. So the benefit to you is that if you die within 10 to 14 years after retirement, there's still money left in your bucket to leave in a lump sum to a designated beneficiary. And in order to get that added protection, you take a slight reduction from whatever your maximum benefit is. Might be 1% or less. Now, what about in the event that should you pass away, there would be some financial hardship potentially for one or more survivors? Then you could look to options 2 through 4 to help solve that challenge in the makeup of your family matrix. So under option 2, for example, whatever you were receiving at the time you pass away becomes the starting benefit for your designated beneficiary. So it's a very rich benefit for beneficiaries. So let's say you took option 2 at retirement, and when you pass away, you were making $4,000 a month from TRS. Well, then we would pay that same $4,000 a month to your designated beneficiary. And then they would also get cost of living adjustments, just like you did while you were living. So you can see from that being a very rich benefit for them, it has more of an effect on your benefit while you're both living. I would say on average, maybe 10 to 25% less than your maximum benefit if you were to take option 2, but you won't know what your reduction is until you actually see your benefit estimates. Let's skip the pop-ups for now and go to option 3. Under option 3, your beneficiary gets 1/2 of whatever you were getting at the time you pass away. So in our example, you were getting $4,000 a month from us when you passed. If you took option 3 at retirement, your beneficiary would get half that, or $2,000 a month, which may be enough to cover the needs of your survivor. And the benefit to you and your beneficiary while you're both living is that the deduction from your TRS check is less than the option 2 deduction. So under option 3, I would say the reduction is 5 to 15% on average, less than your maximum. So let's go to the pop-ups and then to option 4. Option 2 pop-up and option 3 pop-up work the same as their respective options with one difference. And that is you can only have one primary beneficiary under the pop-ups. Under all the other ones, you can have as many as you want. But in the pop-up, if your sole primary beneficiary dies first, your benefit pops up to the maximum plan of benefits. And I would say the normal pop-up is $300 or $400 more a month. You might look at a pop-up if you say were to, you knew you were going to be depending upon a beneficiary's income. Maybe your beneficiary is going to be working for a while you're retired. If that beneficiary were to pass away, then the pop-up could replace all or some of that money that your beneficiary was earning. That's just one possible scenario for wanting a pop-up. Adding a pop-up to option 2 or 3 does not cost a lot. Relatively speaking, it might be, $70 to $100 to add a pop-up. But again, you wouldn't know that until you see your benefit estimate. And then lastly, we have option 4 that allows you within limits to customize the benefit that you're going to get and the benefit that your beneficiary would get. So maybe the options I've described so far aren't going to meet your family needs the best or meet your goals the best. You could look at option 4 to leave a specific dollar amount or a percentage of your benefit to one or more beneficiaries. For example, you could leave $1,000 a month to a beneficiary, or you could leave 1/3 of your benefit to a beneficiary, or you could leave 75% to a beneficiary. So you can really fine tune how much you're going to get and how much they're going to get. So you could be very more sophisticated about your retirement planning and find out just how much, say, a spouse would need in order to meet his or her subsistence needs if you were to die first. And the whole idea is that while you're both living, you can maximize what you're getting from TRS. So that in a nutshell are the options that are available to you at retirement. You'll make this decision when you're within 6 months of your planned retirement date. But we do suggest that you make the decision when you're 6 months out to 2 months out, because we need basically a couple months to do the processing. So if you want to get your first check on time, go online and apply when you're 6 to 2 months prior to your effective date of retirement. You can retire up to the last day of the month. You can get your paperwork to us right at the end, but it could delay the receipt of your first check. So you have yet another decision to make. Sorry about all the decisions, but that's whether or not you want one of these partial lump sum option plans, or PLOP for short. So you've picked your option. Now you got to decide if you do or don't want one of these. It's a lump sum distribution of cash in lieu of a permanently reduced lifetime monthly benefit. You can get anywhere from 1 month of your maximum benefit all the way up to 3 years of your maximum benefit in the form of a lump sum payment. 1 out of 10 of our retirees decides to take one of these plops. The average gross amount before any taxes is somewhere around $65,000. You can do anything you want with this money. You could roll it into a qualified retirement plan like an IRA at a bank or your 403B at work. I'm sure they would take it. And you could defer taxes on it until you start taking it out. Or if you put any of it in your pocket to spend on anything, then you have to pay regular state and federal taxes. If you're under age 55, there's a penalty tax of 10% involved. So you may want to consult a tax advisor, licensed financial advisor, before you take one of these, see if it makes sense for you. A fantastic component of your TRS benefit is that you get cost of living adjustments as long as there's inflation as recorded by the Consumer Price Index. And that being the case, every January and July, you get a 1.5% increase. It may not seem like a lot, but after you've been retired 12 or 13 years, your TRS pension has grown 50% after 12 or 13 years. So I have a lot of retirees who come to me when I'm out on the road, and they're all smiles saying, you know, I'm making more now than I did when I was actively working through these COLAs. And that can be you. It is truly a marvelous component that you don't see in many other, gosh, in most retirement plans. It just doesn't happen. Your very first COLA is cycled in. It takes 7 to 12 months, depending on your retirement date, and then every 6 months thereafter. If you're the typical classroom teacher whose last day of work is in May, your effective retirement date is June 1. And that being the case, you wait the shortest 7-month period for your first COLA. But let's say you had a snow day and you had to make it up in June, then you're a July 1 retirement and you'd have to wait the full 12 months. But after that, it's every 6. So now we're going to look at a benefit estimate. This is the top half. We do recommend that you get one when you're within 2 years of retirement eligibility. The computer is going to need certain assumptions from you, like when you want to retire. And this, you would plug that in. Remember, it's always the first of the month following your last day of actual work. The computer will then pull the highest 24 months to get your high average salary. It'll show you your minimum and maximum plop amounts. It'll show you how much current service you have when this was printed, how much more you're anticipated to have to your projected retirement date. If you want to assume pay increases from the time you run this to the time you retire, you can. If you want to be more conservative, you can leave that at 0. We don't know your unused sick leave. A lot of teachers think that we've got a running record at TRS. We do not. We have to, through your work, collect the balances that were earned at all your former school systems. Your very last school system, it's easy. When you're on the online application process, you simply indicate that you want us to collect your unused sick leave from your last school system. And we can email them and they email it back. Unfortunately, for technical reasons, we can't do that for all of the school systems that you worked at. So any of the prior ones, you can send them the form electronically. You could mail it to them. When they get it, they'll know what to do. You fill out a part, they fill out a part, and then they email it or mail it back to us. And then we add it all together for you. And we're going to look at a little bit more sick leave later on. But for estimate purposes, you want to have the best possible guess projection that you can so that your estimate is as accurate as it can be. For anticipated other service, that would be for service purchases that you're thinking of making but have not yet made. So for most of us, that'll be a 0, but you could include that if you were going to buy something and wanted to see how that would impact your benefit. Here's the fun half of the estimate, the bottom half. It shows how much the retiree and the beneficiary are going to get under the different options. Jacob Smith is the retiree. John Smith is the beneficiary. And you can see under the maximum plan, he's going to get the most available, the $38.14 a month. Under the maximum plan, if Jacob wanted $1,000 of plop, that would reduce his benefit by $8. That's how you read that. And what would John get if Jacob died first? Nothing, 0, because remember, we're talking about the maximum plan. which does not leave a monthly survivor benefit. So under option 1, remember that extends the life of your bucket of money to the 10 to 14 years. That reduces Jacob's benefit by about $30 a month. And again, John would get nothing as a monthly benefit. But then going to option 2, you see the benefits reduced about $300 a month from the maximum plan. But for that reduction, if Jacob dies first, John's going to get the same amount of money that Jacob was getting when he passed away. The option 2 pop-up, you can see by adding the pop-up to option 2, it reduces the benefit by about $80 a month to the $34.32 amount. But if the pop-up is taken and John dies first, Jacob's benefit pops up from the $34.32 to the $38.14, so about $400 a month. With option 3, you can see Jacob took about $150 reduction to the $36.55. So it's less of a reduction than the option 2 benefit. But if Jacob dies first, John's benefit is half the amount, or $18.27. And the pop-up works the same way under option 3. Now, option 4 is the customized benefit, where you could designate a specific dollar amount or a percentage. If you want an option 4 estimate of a specific dollar amount or percentage, just let us know and we can put it in there for you. But as a courtesy, we typically just throw in $100 so you can see the impact. And in this case, for every $100 that Jacob wants to leave John, it reduces Jacob's benefit by about $9 a month, going from the $38.14 to the $38.05. So there you have it. That's what an estimate looks like without the graphics. Of course, the names and the numbers will be unique to you and your beneficiaries. Again, we do recommend that you get one of these for yourself when you're about 2 years out. You can get them as early as 5 years out, but we think the optimal time is 2, because then you still have plenty of time to get any issues rectified. Like if something doesn't look right to you, there's still plenty of time to get it fixed. So let's talk more about creditable service. Remember, the more of this stuff you have, the more you're going to get from TRS. We saw it in the formula earlier on. And creditable service is comprised of membership service, your day-to-day service, your unused sick leave time, and something we call purchased service. So let's look at each of these in more depth. For every month you work, half the month or more, you get credit for that month from TRS. And we give credit in 1 month increments. And you may remember, if you've been around long enough, that we generally had 9-month contracts. Now they're all 10, 11, or 12. Now, we didn't make a change when we went from 9 to 10-month contracts. So, and that benefits you because 9 months under TRS equals 1 year. So every month that you complete, you get 1/9 of a year credit. So once you've got 9 months in during our fiscal year, which runs from July 1 through the end of June, once you hit 9 months in that time frame, you have your 1.0 years with us. Now you're all saying, but I work 10, 11, or 12 months. What do I get? Well, you get 1.0 years. You don't get extra credit for working more than the 9 months a year. You hit your 9 months, you stop accruing service credit until we start a new fiscal year every July 1. Okay, but let's say your career ends and you didn't have a whole year. Maybe you had 3/9 of a year. Well, that counts in the formula too. It just gets all thrown into the bucket, multiplied by the 2% times your high average salary to get your benefit. So you don't have to worry or stress over, not finishing out a school year. Under the law, you can accrue 1.25 days of sick per month per your contract type per year. So if you're a 10-month contract person, you could accrue up to 12.5 days a year. There were some systems that paid more than this, like Cobb and I think Marietta, Atlanta Public School. They're pretty much all now on the same page, awarding 1.25 days per year. I know if you're Board of Regents in the university system, they award 1 day per month. But by law, and most school systems do have an accrual of 1.25 days. So if you're an 11-month, that means 13.75 days, 12 months, 15 days. So remember, I told you that you don't get extra service credit for working more than the 9 months. Well, if you don't use your unused sick leave and you're 11 or a 12-month contract, you're going to get more from TRS because you've worked more of the year because of your contract type, provided, of course, again, that you don't use that sick leave. Now, you don't see sick leave on your very first check. Usually takes second or third check because we process your sick leave right after you retire, not before. But we do make you whole with a separate check so that you don't lose any money. Here is the chart. Now, if we were in person, I'd be handing out a member's guide. And I think right now the member's guide is not on the web because it's undergoing a revision. But you could go to the website. I'm sure at some point we've got this chart out there. You can see you need at least 60 days of unused sick to get any additional credit. If you have 60 to 69 days, that's 3 months, or we would add 3/9 of a year, or 0.333 years would get added to your total. So let's say you had 175 days of unused sick. That would get you 9 months unused sick leave credit, or 1.0 years extra credit. If that was you, well, you could work 29 years and get 1 additional year of unused sick to get up to 30 and then retire. A lot of teachers do that. Or you might have 2 years. You might have 350 days. That's common too. You work 28, you use 2 years of unused sick to get up to 30 and retire. Your other option would be any variation of that. You could work 30 years and then get 1 or 2 additional years credit and have a larger benefit. When I talked about the formula, I may not have mentioned that you can go all the way up to 40 years and get 80%. So the only thing that's magic about 30 is that you can retire regardless of your age, but you can keep going if you want to. If you're in need or enjoying what you're doing, you can go over 40 and still get a bigger benefit if your salary's growing. Now, granted, a lot of teachers don't do that, but it's important for you to realize that the only cap on sick leave is 40 total years when you take your service plus sick leave plus any service purchases. It can't go over that 40-year cap. If your school system awards you sick leave in hours, divide it by 8, and then you'll have the equivalent number of days that you can use in this chart. Now, this chart only goes to 2 years. If you have more, we have charts that go all the way up to 4 years. Okay. I'm sure if you do have questions, it looks like some of you are putting them in the chat box. put them there, and then time permitting, I'll go in there and answer them when I'm done, until Karen tells me I can't talk anymore. All right, service purchases, that's the last topic, I think, before beneficiaries. As the name implies, this is buying service, because the law allows you to purchase certain kinds of service out there. Some of you may already have had a cost calculation, and you can get those updated. You're never under any obligation to buy this if you get a cost calculation. Once you get a cost calculation, then you could look at the numbers and say, well, I'm going to get this many more dollars because I buy this time. How long is it going to take me to pay off the purchase price? We call that cost benefit analysis. And in some cases, it might only be 2 or 3 years. In other cases, it could be quite a bit longer than that. So it may or may not make sense for you. This is another area where you may want to seek the assistance of a licensed financial advisor. No one at TRS is going to tell you, give you advice what to do or not to do. We're not licensed or insured to do that. But I always recommend the first place you go, if you don't already have an advisor, is go to your school system's 403B vendor, because they are licensed to talk to you about these sorts of things. And they know, what challenges and opportunities teachers have, because that's who they're working with. So probably the most common one is TRS withdrawn. That's where you worked for a while and you quit and you withdrew the money in your bucket. And then down the road, you decide you want to come back to teaching. Once you've been back 3 years at a minimum, that's 3, the law allows you to purchase back what you cashed out on. And all you're doing is giving us back the money we gave you plus interest for the time you had the money. This one does not take long to see the benefit from. It might have a payback period of 2 or 3 years. So if any of you out there have withdrawn service, seriously consider buying it back and enjoying the additional pension that you would get from it. Another common one is out-of-state service, where you taught for a while at an out-of-state school. Many teachers have bounced around all over the country. Maybe you have unvested benefits. Say in Alabama, you have a year, or you have 2 years in Tennessee. You're never going to get a pension for those short stints, right? I think the minimum vesting out there is 5 years. So I think anything less than 5, it may very well make sense to convert that to Georgia time and get a higher pension from us, because you're not going to be getting any kind of pension from 1 or 2 or 3 years of service in any state. Now you can give up a vested pension and convert that to Georgia time, but that becomes a much more complicated calculation, and it may not make sense for you. You could always collect from 2 different states. Say you had 10 years in Texas and 20 years here. Well, you get a check from Texas and a check from us. It may not make sense. The most you can move to Georgia is 10 years. So let's say you had 15 years in Texas, you'd have to give up 5 of those to move Texas over here. So in that case, it might not make any sense at all. But I think it's kind of an easy choice when you only have 1, 2, or 3, or 4, and you're not going to be getting any benefit. If you have any military service during a period of national emergency, not the reservists time, but active military duty, you can buy up to 5 years of that, and it could be very cost effective. If you were a state employee in Georgia under ERS, maybe you worked for DFACS or corrections or any state agency, Department of Education under ERS, that can be bought and converted to TRS time. There are others. There's something called airtime, where you have at least 25 years in, and you're doing this in conjunction with a retirement, you can buy up to 3 years just because you want to get out earlier. But if it were that easy, everyone would do it. The only catch is it's extremely expensive. Just to give you an idea, this isn't how we calculate it, but in general, 1 year of airtime costs in the neighborhood of 1 year of your TRS benefit. So if you're going to get 40,000 a year from us to start, 1 year of airtime would be in the neighborhood of $40,000. So it's not the sort of thing that's purchased too often, but you should know that it's out there. If you taught at a private school in Georgia, you can get up to 10 years of that as long as it was accredited. But like airtime, private schools, very, very expensive. There are a few others that aren't utilized all that often, so I'm not going to go into them, but you can look them all up on our website under service purchases to see if you qualify for any of them. And now our last topic of the day is beneficiary issues. There are two kinds of beneficiaries, primary and secondary. If you want someone to get a monthly benefit, let's say multiple people, they all have to be listed as primaries. With one rare exception, secondary beneficiaries aren't going to be getting a monthly benefit. Some people think when a primary beneficiary passes, we then, promote the secondary to a primary. That doesn't happen with one rare exception. But it is important to have a secondary. And that is because if you and the primary are both deceased, when there's still money left in your bucket, we would pay the leftover balance in a lump sum to the secondary beneficiary. So it's important to have one and make sure it's someone other than who you've designated as the primary beneficiary. Because remember, we don't keep any of the money that you put in. It always goes back either to you and your monthly benefit or to a designated beneficiary, okay? Let's say you pass away in active service. That means you didn't get a chance to retire. You either passed away in a 4-year period after your active employment status passed, or while you're actually working. So what happens if you pass away in active service and you're not vested? You don't have 10 years. Well, whatever in your bucket goes in a lump sum to your designated beneficiary. However, if you have 10 or more years, and I'm imagining most of you listening right now are vested, you have 10 or more years. If you pass away in active service, there's protection out there for your beneficiary because that beneficiary has a choice of either taking a lifetime pension under option 2, or they can take the money in your bucket, whichever one they want. In a normal life expectancy situation, they're going to get far more money in the long haul taking the lifetime pension in option 2, but legally we're required to give them a choice of one or the other. Now, in the rare scenario where there's no surviving primary beneficiary, when there's a death in active service, we promote the secondary into the primary status, and that secondary, now primary, gets the same choice as the original primary. Couple things. Remember, I'm only talking about a death in active service, not a death once you've retired. Then it's different. And when might this sort of thing happen? Well, a car accident, let's say. You and your spouse, who's your beneficiary, are in a car accident and you both pass away. Then we would look to who you designated as secondary. And then that secondary would become the primary and get a choice of option 2 or the money in your bucket. All right. I know this is getting a little complicated. I'm not going to go into all the nuances of what you can and can't do if there's a death or divorce, but these are the only scenarios where you can make a change to your plan option or your beneficiary after you've got your first check. So it's real important that you're comfortable with your choice and your beneficiaries before you get that first check, because you can't call us after the fact, say, oops, I made a mistake. I should have designated this person. Should have taken option 2 instead of option 3. We have a binding contract. So just be aware of that. But in retirement, once there's a death or divorce, you can make certain limited changes under the law. We are legally obligated to pay the beneficiaries designated online with us or on our forms. Things like wills, divorce decrees, remarriages have no bearing on who we pay. It's who you told us on our paperwork. We're not subject to probate. We have a contractual relationship with you. And I can tell you every year we have someone who got a divorce, got remarried, never remembered to change beneficiaries, and then that member died. And we have to pay the original spouse that our member divorced years ago. And it's not a happy scenario for anyone except perhaps the divorced spouse who's getting all this money. So I say that in case you're in that scenario, don't forget to update your beneficiary if you want to. It's okay to designate a minor child. We would just look to the court-appointed guardian to manage those funds until the child became an adult. If it's an estate, that's fine if it's for the maximum plan, but we can't pay a monthly benefit to an estate. So it's real important that you don't designate estates if you have a survivorship plan, options 2 through 4. You can designate a special needs trust if you have a child with a disability. You can do power of attorney. So if you got special needs, in all likelihood, you can set it up the way you need to, but I would contact a specialist at TRS so that you word it the correct way. Here's our website. We are now open for in-person visits. I know you're probably all scattered about the state, but we do in-person in our Atlanta office. There's a Macon office as well. We also do virtual one-on-one counseling. If we're going to be in person with your school system randomly out in the future, you can sign up for that. Remember, if you want specific advice, to talk to a licensed financial planner or certified financial planner, licensed financial advisor. All your checks are going to be via direct deposit, including your first one. You'll get it around the middle of the month that you retire. All subsequent checks are the first business day of the month for that month. So the next step is to get excited because you're almost there. Congratulations. And I will stop sharing my PowerPoint at this point. And do we have time for chat box, Karen?
Let's do 2 or 3 questions, Mike, if they seem to be generic and apply to most people.
All right.
Because otherwise I encourage people, as Mike has said, to set up an appointment so you can make sure you get advice specific to your situation.
Okay. Well, there's one question here. What if I have years of credit from another state? Remember we talked about out-of-state service purchases. You could buy that time potentially and move it over here to Georgia. So if you're not vested in that other state, you maybe have a few years there, you may want to look at moving them over here. I heard a rumor that the highest 2 years are limited and can't be more than 2% than other years of service. Can you explain this? Well, there is something called a cap And you can't have increases that exceed the legal limit from 1 year to the next in the 24 months that we use for your high average salary. And usually that cap is around 4.5% a year. Any raise over that 4.5% wouldn't get counted in the formula because of this cap. And the way you can do what we call a workaround so that all your higher salary is included in the formula is to simply work 3 years at the higher salary. It may mean working longer than you had anticipated, but if you want all that money to count in the formula, you got to work 3 years. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 years in that, at that higher salary, and then you'll be fine. How old do you have to be when you retire to keep state health benefit plan? There's no age requirement to keep health insurance, as long as you're, the law requires that you're getting a pension from your respective retirement system. I'm assuming for you all that's TRS because you're listening to me. So as long as you're going to be getting a TRS pension, the law allows you to continue that coverage into retirement. So it's real important you have it before you retire so that you can have it continue on into your retirement. And then, as I said, the premiums are deducted from your TRS check. And I think that covers the chat box, Karen.
Great. Mike, always a pleasure to have you with us. And as I've been mentioning throughout the morning, I will share the PowerPoint that you send to me with all participants along with your
Great.
contact information so people can continue to reach out and get their questions answered. So thank you for sharing, Mike. I'm appreciative.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. And amongst the things I will be sending out is information about how to continue being or to join the GAE retired organization. Even now, you can join as a pre-retired member. And what you're doing is basically locking in your dues now, the one-time lifetime membership fee. It is hefty, it's $450. But you can pay that over several months from your credit card or from a checking account, not your payroll check, because if you're a GAE member, your active dues are coming out. So right now, in joining the pre-retired and retired organizations, the $450 would be paid over 4 months, May through the end of the GAE membership year, which is August 31st. So it's $112.50 for 4 months. And again, you're locking in your GAE lifetime dues. You never pay that ever again. When I retired the 12 years ago or 10 years ago, it was $300. So you get the idea that to continue to be a member of GAE retired and NEA retired, the cost is going to go up. And the last little spiel about that is GAE Retired is a very active organization, as you can see through in the state, and you still get to keep your GAE and NEA member benefits to save you money in retirement. So I'll be sending information out about that. I thank you for being here this morning. I always say in the time period 9 to 1, because we do cover a lot of information. Nobody ever seems to complain if we get through a few minutes early. And I know that you received a lot of information this morning, and I'm sorry it was all kind of sit and get, but hopefully you will take time to decipher it as it arises on your platter to do so. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns. And retirement, it is coming soon, I know, and get excited about it. And in the meantime, thank you for everything you do for public education. And thank you for being here this morning. It says if you worked 4 years with a college or university system, could that time count towards retirement? Again, I would contact TRS directly. I am not with TRS, so I don't want to give you more or misinformation. So please reach out, and thank you all for the kind words about the presentation. Have a lovely weekend, and even the school year is close to ending for you. So look for an email from me in the next few days with all the links to the information. Again, thank you for being here this morning. Bye.